An eroge-induced epiphany leads Hyodo Issei down a path of hard work, excellence and extreme degrees of trauma suppression. Add to that a grumpy old dragon, an overpowered sacred gear, a frisky succubus and munchkin-worthy tactics that put the capital P in power creep, and you've got yourself a nice mess. Oh, and there's also devils, and angels, and stuff. Cover by Utaku. Chapter 1 Disclaimer. High School DxD is not mine. Nor will it ever be. Unfortunately for me. Fortunately for everybody else probably. If you feel I have bastardized your favorite franchise or something of the sort, you are free to tell me so. I am, however, also free to ignore flames, and focus instead on criticism, be it positive or negative. Onwards, to the story. Ooh, and no, stop, please. The innocent blonde's distressed cries as her clothes were ripped apart brought a deep sense of despair into Issei. His heart clenched tightly as he watched a girl that he had dedicated much effort and time to at the mercy of a bunch of brutes who had ambushed the two of them outside of school, beaten the crap out of him, and were now lecherously letting their gaze flow all over the girl. Issei felt further crushed when he saw the girl's tears as a hand went below her skirt, reaching into her panties and touching her. Bad end, god fucking damn it. Hyodo Issei could only curse up a blue streak that would make a sailor blush as he watched his playthrough through his latest eroge visual novel, result in another bad end. Motohama, the famed, 3-size scouter of Mahiroshi Junior High adjusted his glasses as he spoke up, while Matsuda of Sexual Harassment Paparazzi fame moaned in disgruntlement. I told you, Issei, the harem route is pretty much impossible to complete, no matter how many times we try. This has to be, what, our 65th try? Issei, the last member of Mahiroshi Junior High's infamous, perverted trio, responded by slamming his face onto his desk, repeatedly, while Matsuda spoke up as well. We've got to give this one up as a bad job, bro. All the bad ends we got already aside, there's the matter of the fulfillment of our real-life dreams. Motohama and Matsuda wrapped an arm over each other's shoulder, massive rivers of tears streaming down their faces as they shouted out in tandem. The exclusive, previously all-girls academy recently turned co-ed with an estimated 80% female-to-male ratio, KUOH Academy. Rapidly overcoming their burst of emotion and cleaning himself from Matsuda's man germs, Motohama spoke up in a serious tone, adjusting his glasses in a manner that caused the glare to hide his eyes. This isn't going to be easy, Issei. We swore to ourselves, each other, and on our dreams, that we would manage to make our way past the difficulties of life and into any healthy young man's paradise. We need to dedicate as much time as possible into studying for the admittance test, even if it cuts into each of our allotted, personal amusement, time. We have no time to waste with an impossible-to-reach goal. It's not impossible. The vehemence in the statement did not at all surprise Matsuda or Motohama, who were both aware of their friend's lifelong dream. The two could only sigh inwardly as Issei continued. If there is a harem ending, I shall reach it. I will not sleep, I will not eat, I will not hesitate nor will I give up. My goals, my dreams, my future, they all hang on the possibility of me clearing this. Hey, where the hell are the two of you going? The inflamed tone was replaced by a half-bewildered, half-irritated one as Motohama and Matsuda made their way out of Issei's room mid-monologue. How rude. Sighing out loudly, Matsuda was the one to answer. Not that I don't want to help you, Issei, I really do, but I also really need to study. I tried for the mock exams and got a flat 30%, and you need to get at least a 75% to be made a viable candidate for KUO, and need to beat out 80% of the other test takers in order to get accepted, so I need to start cramming as soon as possible. Issei's gaze switched over to Motohama, getting only a nod in agreement. Irritation filling him, Issei huffed before speaking up. Fine. Leave. But you'll regret it when you see that I managed to both get the true end in the harem route, and manage to get into KUO. His friends didn't bother refuting his claims, waving him goodbye as they made their way out of his home, while Issei sat down in front of his computer and glared at it with a scary level of intensity. Of course they just gave up and left. It's not their dream that's on the line. I mean, if I don't manage to get the harem ending in some game without looking up a guide, how the hell can I manage to get one in real life? It'd be like giving up on my dream, turning my back on it, and I refuse to do it. His spirit aflame, Issei put himself in the proper mindset to get his good ending. Hour after hour, day after day went by as Issei tried varying tactics. He tried changing the order in which he took his love interests for dates, the precise moment when he triggered their flags, which presents or gave, which routes he took. However, failure was the only thing that he met. That is, until he decided to change tactics. Instead of changing the way in which he did ways in-game, he started fiddling with the game settings, trying to find some hidden slider, some secret stat, a novel route, until he eventually found what he was looking for. His solution was born out of desperation more than anything else. Regardless of whatever it was he said to his friends, Issei did not intend to go into the testing room without studying. Knowing that he wasn't ever really the sharpest knife in the drawer, Issei decided to give himself at least 2 months' worth of study time before the test, and he was already 2 days away from reaching that line. Feeling that he had nothing else to lose, Issei decided to try for the ultimate challenge. He erased his previous save, tainted with the failure of a bad end, and started a new one. However, instead of using his usual settings of difficulty normal and time limitless, he chose to play in difficulty "Are you FC King kidding me?" and time ultra sprint. As far as he was aware, those settings were added by the developers as a "screw you" to any would-be completionists, forever locking out the game's full completion, as pretty much even the easiest of routes was supposed to be insanely hard. Issei was a man with no limits. Foregoing such useless things as food, water, toilets and sleep, with cumulative years of experience in all things eroge and visual novel, and a healthy amount of prayer and praise to RN Jesus, Issei managed to do it. True harem end unlocked. He managed to get the happy end that he desired, and all it took him was finishing the game with maxed charisma, knowledge, wealth, and martial prowess scores, finding the hidden, legendary grade, marital arts, skill book, defeating the true final boss, Es Reaver Renob Taxdog, and absolutely obliterating any and all enemy to ensure that he and his harem were safe. Having finally gotten what he truly desired from life for that short time frame, Issei decided to finally make his parents aware of the fact that he was alive, his stomach aware of the fact that food existed, and his body aware of the existence of this thing called a bath. But, after taking his first step out of his desk chair, he felt the strength leaving his body, causing him to collapse on the ground. After that is when things got crazy. While his body had shut down to rest, his mind was still functioning. After a fashion. Flashes passed through his mind. Rapid still frames of various different moments of his marathon session of Legend of the Arrow Hero, passing by as if in a slideshow, with the majority of the images focusing on his final stats: 100% charisma, 100% knowledge, 100% wealth, and 100% martial prowess, interspersed with various shots of his character's dates, the various events he had to perfect run in one go, and the defeated forms of his enemies. And it was in that moment that Issei had an epiphany. If he wished to get his vaunted harem end in real life, he couldn't slack off. The game didn't allow him to get it playing in easy mode, or with no time limit. The game did not forgive anything less than full effort. Charisma, to attract the women to him. Knowledge, to learn how to separate the girls that truly love him from those who would try to use him. Wealth, to ensure safety, stability and a future for his large family later on in life. And martial prowess, to defend himself and all of them from malicious people, attacking them either out of spite or jealousy. Friends were to be protected, enemies to be put deep into the dirt, the hardships of life to be met with an iron resolve, and time constraints to be observed and taken into consideration. It was either the life of a harem, or no life at all. Returning to consciousness a few hours later, Issei's first action was to gag, as his head was curled into his armpit, at an uncomfortable angle, even. His second action was to climb back to his feet, his head shaking as he tried to decipher the myriad of blurry images that he felt had engraved themselves into the inside of his eyelids. He didn't have any idea what any of them meant, but he did know something. He wanted to excel beyond all expectation. He didn't know where the desire, nay, compulsion came from, and neither could he possibly, as it was the work of his unconscious mind, but he knew that he no longer desired to be a lout, an easily dismissible, below-average perverted monkey. Even if it cut into his time for arrow, and even the holiest of the pervert's activities. Peaking. Excelling came above all of this. His whole future depended on it. But first, he really needed a shower. Mr. and Mrs. Hyodo had no idea if what they were seeing was real, or if there was a gas leak in their home and they were currently in heaven, their corpses still cooling on the living room floor. Their son, Issei, the one they hadn't seen for all of 2 weeks as he had locked himself in his room to do God knows what that made them all but sure that they'd die without ever meeting their grandchildren, was studying. He was sitting at the dinner table, his face showing his seriousness and focus as he read through a math worksheet, making various different noises as he compared his results to the ones in the book. Focused as he was, Issei never noticed his parents' presence as he spoke up in a blank tone. 83%. His parents were ready to faint right there and then, hearing they're underachieving. 60% is good enough, son Issei scoring an 80% in what seemed to be a mock exam. However, if they were surprised before, his following words caused their brains to freeze. Not good enough. I can do better. No, I have to do better. Mrs. Hyodo's legs lost their strength, causing her to fall backwards into a chair her husband had placed behind her in anticipation, while Mr. Hyodo slowly walked up to his son as if he were a dangerous animal, speaking in a calm, soothing tone. Issei, is everything okay? The youngest Hyodo blinked in surprise as his parents' presence was finally registered in his brain. Taking a few seconds to interpret the question, Issei finally answered in a semi-absent-minded tone. Yeah, I'm fine. Why, and what's wrong with Mom? While Mrs. Hyodo tried to overcome her mental freeze, Mr. Hyodo spoke up for both of them. Mom's just feeling a bit tired, but that's not what's important. Son, are you really feeling okay? You're not sick or anything? No cold, no fever. Scratching his cheek with his pencil's erases, Issei answered even as he read back through the chapter the book was open to. No, I'm perfectly okay. A bit hungry, but hey, that's the price of success. His eyes gaining an intense look, Papa Hyodo spun Issei's chair around, ignoring his irritated grump, before placing both of his hands onto his son's shoulders, meeting the boy's gaze as he asked. Son, who's the girl? The only thing missing to display the full level of Issei's confusion were interrogation marks floating over his head. What girl? Ignoring his son's question, Mr. Hyodo kept speaking. I understand perfectly, son. When you meet the right woman, you feel like doing everything possible to impress her. Just make sure that in trying to better yourself for her, you do not end up forgetting who you really are. As much as Mom and I prefer this studious you any day, was left unsaid. Eyeing his father strangely, Issei collected his study materials, and he spoke as he went away, headed towards his room. Dad, I think you should probably rest. I'll be studying. In my room. Don't interrupt me, please. Ignoring everything his son had said, Papa Hyodo could only give his son a massive thumbs up, even as manly tears streamed down his eyes. Absolutely weirded out by this, Issei ran as fast as he could up to his room. Dear, I just had the weirdest dream. Issei was studying. Willingly. Making his way towards his wife, Mr. Hyodo knelt down in front of her, taking both of her hands into his own as he spoke to her, his gaze locked on hers. It wasn't a dream, dear. Issei really was studying. Her eyes widening in bewilderment, she could only move her lips, producing mostly inarticulate sounds, with the occasional semblance of wah and wah coming out. Mr. Hyodo decided that he needed to explain everything to his wife before she short-circuited right into the mental treatment ward. Our Issei is growing up, dear. It seems he finally met a proper girl that made him wish to improve himself, and cast aside his silly, childish dreams. Tears welled up in Mama Hyodo's eyes as the prospect of an eternally useless, perverted son ending up locked up for life for various sexual misconducts was slowly supplanted in her mind for the image of a grown-up Issei next to a featureless shade with an obviously female shape, with two smaller shades in front of them, one of a boy and one of a girl, both almost featureless except for the boy's brown hair, and the girl's brown eyes. She pulled her husband into a tight hug, inadvertently realigning his aching back and saving him a trip to the chiropractor, before wailing and blubbering loudly, with the occasional grandbabies thrown into the mix for good measure. Issei, for his part, was completely unaware of what occurred downstairs, focusing only on further increasing his final test results. 2 months later, turning over his test sheet, Issei only barely managed to withhold a sigh of relief, reminding himself that things were only just starting. Overconfidence in the face of what seemed to be easy victory could mean defeat. He lost enough times to Pega, the sadistic femdom queen, in Journey to the Center of Nishi Aoki, to know that even the weakest boss can absolutely destroy you if you got distracted. Focusing completely and reading things through, Issei went through the math segment, checking and double-checking his answers one at a time, before moving over to biology and repeating the feat. He finished that portion, then proceeded to push his way through history, physics and English, which were the requirements to make it into Kuo. Even after rechecking his entire test for errors, ensuring that he did not forget to write his name down, and taking care of any smudges with his eraser, Issei managed to finish the test with 15 minutes to spare. He left the room all smiles, feeling the other boys around him, for the most part, complaining or despairing. Seeing the very specific curvature of a head shape he knew well enough, Issei made his way to Matsuda, seeing that he was already together with Motohama and talking about something. The two of them didn't seem to be nervous, which probably meant that they had done well in their own tests, but he felt the need to rub his own success in their faces. Motohama, Matsuda. Hey! The two perked up at hearing the voice of the missing member of their trio, with Motohama adjusting his glasses while his gaze thoroughly analyzed the extremely hot teacher that had overseen their test, while Matsuda turned towards Issei and answered. Hey, Issei. Long time no see. Yeah, it's been 2 months already. Having thoroughly catalogued the 3 sizes and committing them to his memory, Motohama turned to face Issei as well before speaking up. Yo, Issei. So, how'd you do in the test? Me and Matsuda were comparing answers, and we think we did pretty well. Not bothering to hide the shit-eating smirk that wanted to stretch across his face, Issei entered full smug mode as he spoke. I beat that test harder than I beat my meat when I found out Miraichi Shiji starred in a lesbian flick with Asa Ida. Matsuda let out a long, low whistle at that, before speaking up. That was a hot video. Means you're really confident in your test performance, huh? Hell yeah. I studied my ass off to get accepted into paradise. And I managed to do it after getting my harem ending. You know, the one you two said I would never accomplish without a guide? You're lying. Turning towards the utterly incredulous Motohama, not that Matsuda looked any different, Issei answered while still in smug mode. Cross my heart and swear to burn my stash. The 2 other perverts inhaled sharply, recognizing the truest sign of honesty they had amongst them. Others would have sworn on their lives, or their gods, or something of the sort, but the 3 knew that those could be said without meaning. But dealing with your porn mag stash? Words were not to be said so lightly. The arrow gods did not look kindly upon deceit. How'd you do it, bro? Hardest difficulty, strictest time limit, maximum effort, averaging 2 hours of sleep per day. Motohama found himself licking his suddenly dry lips, smacking his tongue to regain some of its moisture before he finished. Was it worth it? Absolutely. It was one of the most beautiful sights in my entire life. None of the 3 males were aware that a gulf had suddenly been created between them and the other test takers, who talked amongst themselves while giving them looks of disgust or anger, all the while failing to properly hide their interest in their conversation. Absolutely ignoring this as was habit from middle school, the 3 kept on the flow of their conversation. What happened? How did it end? The memories of the game's epilogue going through his mind, Issei allowed a wistful tone to bleed into his voice as he spoke. It was everything I dreamt of, and some more. Motohama opened his mouth to say something else, but he was interrupted by the ringing of the bell. Blinking distractedly, Issei looked down at his watch, only to curse before he started walking backwards. Shitimlik Gatagasiyulaterbai. Having finished saying that, Issei dashed away from school as if the hounds of hell themselves were snapping at his heels. The Hyodo residence, I'm Ho. The absolute last thing expected to see when he burst through the living room door was his father wearing a leather pony outfit, complete with a gag and bound legs, while his mother wore a skin-tight leather corset that hid her back and stomach. And nothing more. While holding a riding crop, with a ball mask covering her eyes. The 2 parties froze mid-motion, Issei's face absolutely blank, while his parents did their best not to blush, their mortification almost palpable. Closing his eyes, Issei took a few steps backwards, opened the door again, walked back out of his home and closed the door. Taking deep breaths, Issei counted to 10 while his mind dispelled the heat-induced delusion, relegating the image to the deepest, darkest parts of his traumatic memory storage. Other articles tossed into that deep, dark pit of despair and misery were things such as Tubgirl, 2 Girls 1 Cup, and some things he found out while researching fetishes as a child that he still wasn't absolutely sure were legal, and re-centered himself. Having successfully suppressed the memory, Issei went back into his house, slamming the door harder than necessary in order to make noise, before shouting out loud. I'm home. A subconscious impulse prompted him to finish with, for the first time since breakfast. Making his way into the living room, Issei found his parents sitting primly and properly at the dinner table, steaming teacups in front of each of them. With a rather blatantly pasted-on smile on his face, Mr. Hyodo spoke up. "Oh hey Issei, how did the test go?" "I absolutely nailed it," he followed up in his mind with, "and I'll absolutely make my way into paradise." Managing a much more convincing smile, Mrs. Hyodo spoke up. "That's great, Issei. We're sure you managed to get into the school you wanted." The perverted young man crossed his arms and nodded sagely as he spoke. "Of course I did. Now I'll be in my room. The books won't study themselves, you know." Unknowing of her son's incredible ability to completely bury traumatic memories, Mrs. Hyodo decided to try to make up for her child, for doing his absolute best not to embarrass his parents despite the fact that he himself was probably mortified by the situation, maybe even scarred for life. Or worse, Kami forbid, he could have asked to join in. She wasn't sure her heart would have handled something like that. "Well, Issei, me and Papa were talking, and we decided that, depending on the test results, we could send you abroad for a vacation, until at least a week or two from the start of the next school year." "We were—" Mrs. Hyodo absolutely ignored her flabbergasted husband as she watched her son seemingly thinking something through, his focus very intense. Issei then spoke up. "Can I choose my destination?" Before Mr. Hyodo could give any objections about said trip, Mrs. Hyodo spoke up. "Of course you can, as long as it is not excessively expensive." "Thanks, Mom." Issei's instincts told him that he didn't want to touch either of his parents at this moment, though he didn't know why, so he proceeded to go to his room. While also following the instinct telling him to avoid the rug and the couch, moving closer to the kitchen than anything else. Issei's room, while he intended to study some more in order to not make a fool of himself in his new school next school year, hearing about the trip made Issei decide to change priorities. He fired up his computer for the first time since he beat the harem route, but instead of going into his usual adult entertainment websites, or opening one of his more saucy visual novels, Issei decided to do some research. Opening his search engine, Issei decided to search for everything related to tourism. Sexual tourism. Dozens, maybe even hundreds of websites later, Issei had decided on what to do. "I'll use the time between now and getting the test results to get better at English, and to learn Dutch." Those were his primary needs. After all, Issei decided to go to Amsterdam. Ooh, on a totally unrelated note, a certain busty brunette suddenly started chuckling creepily in her usual sadistic manner, the feeling that someone had just been mentally scarred hitting her out of nowhere and surprising her with how refreshing it was. The rest of the peerage around her, who were already used to her mannerisms, did nothing more than ignore it. Prologue. NCH 1 of 47. Next, Chapter 2. A Pervert's Holy Land. Hey there. I see you've decided to return to this story, which means that I'm probably doing something right. That's good. I've decided to open a response section, for reviews that show some level of inquisitiveness or questions, so, here goes the review corner. Fenrir44 says, Issei my man, I hope you have a fine here in the Netherlands. Joking aside, this is a really interesting idea, and if Issei is a ROVN harem protagonist here, will his dear sweet mother fall into his arms as well as that is a big fetish? I don't intend to make that happen. Mama Hyodo and Papa Hyodo are forever shipped. Other MILFs, however, may be fair game. Tribus says, this is pretty interesting. The title seems to be inspired from, So What, If I'm a Spider? If I'm right, tell me, because I realized this really quickly. Issei seems to be what I like to call, reasonably tenacious. Same weird goal, but doesn't seem to wallow in self-defeat at the fact that his personality won't cut it. I have high expectations, bud. Thanks for the kind words and expectations. However, the title has nothing to do with, So What, If I'm a Spider? I don't even know what that title refers to. It's just a coincidence. Siegfried says, now this one is interesting, actually smart Issei, no bullshit, Kikaku Dori, but actually, the power of knowledge and rational thinking. Now I can get behind that. And also the lovable pervert that we love, even better. You got me. Also, is the succubus Morrigan by chance, or an OC? I'm glad that my depiction of Issei comes off as interesting and smart, with no unreasonable, all according to plan, vibes, since it's not part of his character traits. About the succubus, is it Morrigan or an OC? Well, we'll be finding that out soon, aren't we? This marks the end of the review corner for this chapter. Now, onto the story. Ooh. The sound of heavy stomps rushing up the stairs broke Issei's concentration from the book he was perusing. He was still surprised, however, when his mother slammed his door open, her chest heaving at the exertion of climbing up the stairs. It's here, Issei. What's here? Your test results. They came in by mail today. His focus shifted completely onto the white envelope in his mother's grasp. Any thoughts of learning the various ways to express a desire to find a strip club in Dutch shelved for his desire to know whether he managed to get into paradise or not. While he expects to have succeeded based on his good performance, nervousness is a natural thing to occur in the face of life-changing moments. Steeling his nerves and swallowing any trepidation, Issei took the letter from his mother's hands, slowly turning it over to check all of its details. It's actually sealed with wax. Sliding his finger under the envelope's tab, Issei broke the seal and retrieved the letter within. Seeing the massive amount of text in the letter itself, Issei chose to just skim it and get to the important parts, reading out loud for his mother's benefit. Dear Mr. Hyodo, yada yada yada, this very prestigious academy, blah blah blah. Thousands of applicants such as yourself have taken the admittance test with the expectation of joining our prestigious school, and failed. Mrs. Hyodo gasped in surprise and sadness at that, before Issei continued. Fortunately enough, this is not your case. You have managed to pass with a final result of a 98% average throughout the various subjects, leaving you with the highest result out of all participants. We are happy to tell you that you are accepted into our academy, and are expected to give a speech during your first day as the freshman representative, so you are to arrive at least an hour earlier than the rest of the students. Yes. Oh Issei, Mama is so proud of you, and Papa will be as well when he hears of this. Mrs. Hyodo followed that exclamation up by doing a little happy jig where she stood, while Issei allowed his mind to wander and imagine the various things he'd see, feel and experience in paradise. Ooh, Kaya. Ha. On, checking his phone screen for the caller's identity, Issei smirked when he saw that it was a conference call with Motohama and Matsuda. Hey guys, Issei speak, we got in, man. Me and Motohama got in. Issei had to pull the phone away from his ear due to Matsuda's volume, pulling it back in when he noticed the shouting stop, and just in time to hear Motohama's question. What about you? Did you get your test results already? Yeah, I made it in as well, just as promised. Highest grades even. They want me to give a speech during orientation day or whatever, but that's not the most important thing. My parents promised me a trip if I made it into Kuo, and I get to choose the destination. And, Matsuda started, how's that more important than our journey into every healthy young man's dream? Issei's smirk could almost literally be felt through his tone of voice. I chose Amsterdam. You know, the city with an open, dedicated red light district, where prostitution is legal. We're so jealous, was the simultaneous shout from both of his friends, while Issei rubbed his ear hard to get rid of the ringing. Hearing his friends quieting down, Issei spoke up. It was good talking to you guys, but I need to hone my language skills. See ya. 2 weeks later, Issei, suitcase in one and a map in another, could only just contain his excitement. He had finally reached Amsterdam, one of the equivalents of a holy land for those of Arrow beliefs. To simply step onto Amsterdam was akin to performing pilgrimage, and Issei was going to show just how happy he was with this trip very soon. Later, do I look good, or what? Issei watched himself in his hotel room mirror, taking stock of his own appearance. Red button-up shirt, black jacket, a pair of jeans and gray tennis shoes, his hair slicked back with the exception of a single stubborn bang that kept falling back over his forehead no matter what he tried, a healthy dose of deodorant and a splash of cologne. Add to that a healthily filled wallet, a copy of his documents and his phone, and Issei was ready for a wild night. Intent on saving money on cab fare, Issei decided to walk to his objective instead, following his phone's GPS data instead to find his way to the red light district. Even though it was already getting dark, Issei still felt safe, since Amsterdam had a reputation for being a generally peaceful city. In fact, he felt so safe that when he saw an alternate path in his phone's map that would lead him to the promised Neverland sooner, he decided to take it. Despite the fact that it went through a pretty shady alley, and lead to a dilapidated section of the city that he wasn't aware even existed. While initially secure in his choice, Doubts started surfacing as he noticed just how worn out the buildings around him were, and how empty and dead the streets felt. Checking on his wallet in his back pocket and gulping, Issei made sure to let his eyes seek out every shadow, nook, cranny and crevice for suspicious activity, so he knew when to run like a bat out of hell. Low battery. Please recharge. Shutting down. And just like that, Issei's only guiding light died out. Looking behind him, he saw what seemed to be a maze of alleys and side streets. So the only way is forward. He kept going onwards, trying to ignore that way his stomach tried to turn itself inside out, his ears wide open to pick up any possible sound. Hey there, handsome. Issei couldn't suppress the chill that ran down his spine as he heard a dusky, slightly raspy and most definitely female voice. Purr, for a lack of better definition. His head turned woodenly towards the source of the voice, and what he saw had him ready to salivate. The delightfully sinful voice came from a girl that seemed to be around his age, 5 feet 1 inch in height, 111 pounds, purple, butt-length straight hair with parted bangs in front, a blue tube top hugging her prodigious chest which could be nothing less than a DD, paired with a dark purple miniskirt that left most of her thighs in display, and a small fur jacket covering her upper back and shoulders. Her feet were clad in a pair of heels, and she looked like sex incarnate. She didn't allow a word to leave Issei's mouth, her finger covering his lips for an instant before she started walking around Issei and looking him up and down, allowing him to smell the sweet, heady scent of her perfume, causing him to get lightheaded to the utmost extreme, borderline euphoric. And then, she spoke. My, you look good enough to eat. Those specific words caused Issei to stiffen up, in more ways than one. But before he could try to say a thing, he found himself being dragged by the collar into a dark alley. Come and show me how much of a man you are, hun. Mama's been hungry for it for a long time. The girl slammed him into the stone wall harder than Issei believed someone her weight should have the strength to, and crouched, her gaze locked onto his crotch with a scary intensity. But before she could even reach his belt buckle, someone spoke up. Hey there doll, you wanna ditch that punk over there and get a taste of a real man? The deep, gravely voice, akin to two rocks being ground into one another, prompted both the bewildered Issei and the irritated-looking girl to look towards its source, only to see a 7 feet 6 inches, 661 pounds monster of a man, seemingly more muscle than person, blocking the alleyway entrance. The sight was enough to cause Issei's appendage to deflate, and for the haze his mind was in to clear completely, while the girl crouching in front of him at crotch height clicked her tongue in annoyance, before speaking up. Go away, I'm busy. The purpling of the man's face, associated to the throbbing veins all over his bald head and neck, and his clenching fists caused Issei to try to shuffle away from the whole situation, only to find himself stuck in place by the girl's abnormally powerful grip. Before the man could say or do anything, the girl turned towards him and met his gaze, her eyes lighting up imperceptibly as she spoke in the seductive tone she used earlier on Issei. Please, go away. The man's features slackened before he nodded jerkily and mutely, then took a couple of steps backwards, allowing the woman to shift her gaze to Issei again and speak up. Now, where were, she found herself pleasantly surprised as her naive target pulled her to her feet, flipped their positions so that she was with her back to the wall and then squeezed her with his own body in what was an extremely daring move, only for the pleasant feeling to pass as she saw a trash can flying past where she was previously fast enough to kill a person. She looked back to the source of said trash can, seeing the same muscular man at the alley's opening with twisted, twitching features as if he having an internal struggle. The man took a shaky step forward, but before he could do anything else, Issei started running from him, his hand having caught the surprised girl's and dragging her along for the ride. Issei would have commented on how easily the girl ran full speed in high heels had he noticed it, but he was currently more focused in not dying. There was a fork in the road ahead of them and Issei didn't hesitate, speeding down the left one full tilt. A second one came up a few minutes later, and this time he took a right, followed by a junction, which he ran through straight ahead. By the time he stopped, short of breath and red in the face, they had made it to an old, abandoned building. Issei turned towards the girl, intent on asking her about what had just happened, only for the wall behind them to explode violently, causing the two to be thrown in opposite directions. Don't you dare fucking ignore me. Shaking off his daze and letting the ringing in his ears die out, Issei looked back up to the source of the voice, only to see the wall of meat that they had been accosted by change. His skin started to slowly turn blue from the feet up, with the throbbing veins hardening as well. By the time the process stopped, the man looked like a victim of hypothermia, with lapis lazuli for veins. You should be fucking glad someone like me chose to give your ilk any sort of attention. The girl managed to recompose herself earlier than Issei and get back to her feet, cracking her neck even as she clicked her tongue. TCH. Fucking asshole, ruining my dinner. Then, right in front of Issei, a pair of membranous, bat-like wings, purple and pink in coloration, sprouted from her back, alongside a sinuous, barb-tipped tail. She clenched her hands, causing her fingernails to extend to the size of daggers, gleaming with sharpness. Issei's already gaping mouth could only open wider as the girl seemingly vanished from where she stood, turning into a blur of color, before reappearing in front of the man, slashing at his face with vicious abandon. Her danger senses shouting at her, she flared her wings and threw herself backwards, barely avoiding a backhanded smack from the man who was still changing. She landed across from him, watching as his height grew to about 8 feet, his weight growing proportionally. His hands were each as big as a trash cover, his arms as thick as large tree trunks. He looked like a blue steroid abomination, with muscles on top of his muscles. How do you like this, lass? We men of the Jorgensen clan are the most powerful in the Netherlands. No mere cockslut can pierce through my skin. Having said that, the man curled his hand, as if grasping an invisible weapon, only for water droplets to coalesce into his hand, crafting a solid ice club which he hefted onto his shoulder, a nasty smirk pasted on his face all the while. The succubus, deciding to avoid a fight she felt unable to win, attempted to fly away, only a blast of sharpened ice crystals to tear through her wing membranes, getting a scream of pain from her, before she grunted as the fall knocked the air out of her lungs. Blood splatters covered her torso, clothes, as well as some of the floor below her, with more joining the fray as her wings twitched involuntarily. The blue giant slowly made his way towards the girl, his club dragging on the asphalt behind him, stopping only when he was looming over her, with her at his feet. He raised his club, a twisted smirk on his face as he spoke. Any last words? The club started dropping even before she had said a single word, and she watched as death came closer and closer. Boom. Only to feel herself being tackled out of the club's way, which sounded like a pretty good thing as that swing pretty much exploded the concrete that it landed on, making a small crater. She'd more than likely be mush right now, if it weren't for the mostly hapless brunette that seemed to be glaring at the giant with an unexpected level of intensity after witnessing what he had been capable of. The giant, noticing the lack of a familiar cracking and squishing of flesh, blood and sinew, cast his eyes around the area, snarling as he noticed that the human from before involved himself into something that he had nothing to do with. Glaring balefully at Issei, the man spoke up. I am only going to say this once. Move, and you get to live, human. Ignoring the way that human was said as if it were a dirty word, Issei met the giant's gaze with an intense one of his own. I refuse. Ha! You humans really are ignorant of your place in the world. The giant slammed the club on the concrete to his side, causing another small crater, before pointing one of his arm-thick fingers towards the girl behind Issei. You think you're protecting some helpless girl from a big, bad monster, don't you? Newsflash, you're wrong. That isn't some random, helpless girl, that is a succubus, the type of creature that lie, cheat, trick and deceive men at their whims, bringing them under their control with hypnosis, and feeding on their life force. What's most important is that even beings like those, children of Lilith meant only as cock sleeves and slutty slaves, are exponentially stronger than weak humans such as yourself. If I easily took her down, then what chance do you have to beat me? Seeing Issei's continuously defying gaze, the giant sighed, before speaking again. Man, I'm wasting my time here, trying to talk some sense into you, huh? You're probably acting under her thrall, so dosed up that you can't even notice just how dangerous a situation you currently are in. You're wrong. Huh? Issei straightened up, his voice strong as he spoke. I'm not under anyone's thrall, and I know just how dangerous the situation is for me. I watched the two of you fight. I'm nowhere near strong enough to do a thing to any of you. See, then just step aside, and, however, I don't care about anything like that. I chose to stand here on my own, to protect her, and going back on my choice now. It isn't in me to do so. You think you can gain her favor for trying to defend her, kid? Huh? Even if you managed to somehow save her, she was more than likely to trick you into laying with her, drain you of your life essence and move on to the next sap. That's just how succubi are, voracious, deceitful, slutty bitches. The sun finished setting, causing the street lights around them to turn on, bathing the area in an orange glow. Despite that, Issei's eyes were hidden in shadows as he had bent his head downwards as he kept speaking. Favor? Trick? Life essence? Succubus? I'm not sure I understood most of what you said, because I'm really out of my depth right now. But what I do know, is that you are the bad guy here. You're trying to hurt someone who did nothing bad to you. That is why I'm standing here in front of you. Unnoticed by either Issei, or the giant, but noticed by the succubus, was that as the brunette spoke, a green glow started building up around his left hand, tiny particles of light coalescing towards the back of his fist. Unknowing of this, Issei continued. I'm the type of guy who likes helping others. And that's why I won't back down. I won't give up. I will take you down, I will save the girl behind me. And I'll live on, and accomplish my dream. I will get my harem. The fires of determination blazing within his eyes. Issei brought his clenched left hand over his heart as he gave that final, heartfelt declaration, only to be surprised as he felt a pulse of warmth on his left arm, before an explosion occurred. Powerful winds reached the three present individuals, ruffling their clothes and temporarily defeating them, while green light filled their vision, causing the giant to look away, while Issei could only gape silently at what happened. After all, it's not every day that your hand turns into a red gauntlet, a myriad of spiked sections throughout it, and a bright green gem on the back, while a massive surge of energy ripped through your body, taking away your fatigue, soothing away any aches, and making you feel as if you could take on an entire army. What is this? A sacred gear user. Now isn't that more interesting? Issei, still distracted with the gauntlet, did not notice as the ice giant turned a scowl his way, before going towards him, moving faster than anyone his size had a right to. Watch out. Hearing the girl's warning, Issei looked back up, only to be faced with the ice club on a horizontal route to take off his head. Normally he would have been unable to even see the club. But a further pulse of warm, almost uncomfortably so, energy rushing through his body gave him the ability to dodge out of the way of the blow at the last second by leaning backwards, feeling the club just barely skimming his hair, before he threw himself backwards in response to a fist sent with the intent to cave in his chest, reducing the damage from pulverization to only bruising and cracking of his ribs and sternum, which were aggravated as he bounced to a rolling stop on the concrete. The giant cracked his knuckles, expecting the human to have died and ready to destroy the slut that refused him for a human, only for motion at the corner of his eyes to prompt him to look towards where the human had stopped, watching as he slowly, painfully pushed himself back to his feet. Issei's mind was absolutely reeling. His first day in Amsterdam had bombarded him with so many different types of surprises, starting with him almost getting a blowjob in an alley, to discovering that impossible things like succubi and giants existed, to the discovery of his own superpower. Despite this, he managed to narrow his thoughts down to a single purpose: surviving this encounter. I can't beat him as I am. Which means that I need more power. His gauntlet responded to that thought, the gem glowing further and causing an aura, a nimbus of green-colored energy, to emerge around him. However, said aura was accompanied by a generalized sense of agony throughout his body. Aside from the injuries that he already sustained getting worsened by the stress that the previous amount of power was forcing onto his body, this increased power output caused him to feel as if he were burning up from the inside out. However, not enough. More power. Even more of the strange energy flooded Issei's body, and this time he didn't manage to suppress a shout of agony as what felt like liquid magma rushed through his veins, flooding his muscles, bones, organs, marrow and every single one of his cells. I need more power, but my body can't keep up. The giant and the succubus both watched in surprise as the human started putting out power at the level expected from a high-class individual, way beyond what any normal human, unaligned with one of the various factions or pantheons, should be able to. However, they could see the damage that it was having on him. Patches of his skin were turning red and raw, and steam rose from him as if his blood itself was boiling. He was destroying himself to be able to put out this much power, but the fact that his sacred gear even allowed him to was impressive in and of itself. Well then, if my body can't contain all the power I need. The watched as he, painstakingly slowly, raised his red gauntleted hand towards the giant, before curling all of his fingers except for the index inwards, pointing it directly at the blue beast. I'll just need to collect it. outside of my body. He grit his teeth as the power previously tearing his body apart started rushing towards his left hand, causing him to feel the true depth of damage his body had accrued. Yet he did not allow himself to fall over as he so dearly wished he could. He kept pushing the power outwards, causing a tiny pinprick of energy to emerge at the tip of his finger, as big as a grain of sand. As more and more energy was pushed towards the same point, it started growing, the green energy getting as big as a marble, before growing further to the size of a grown man's fist, arcs of energy escaping it occasionally. However, not good enough. Issei felt as if the amount of energy built up was not enough to destroy his enemy, for that was his final goal. Not knock unconscious, or defeat, but to destroy him. However, he knew that attempting to summon more power would definitely kill him, so compress. The fist-sized ball of energy started compressing, the power pulsing occasionally as if trying to return to its full size. However, Issei's will was stronger. Tighter. The power compressed to the size of a donut hole, so dense that the air around it started heating up, giving it a flaming halo. Tighter. The energy shrunk down to half the size of a marble, and before anything else could be said. Fire. It was all over in a second. The crack of something breaking the sound barrier, the widening of eyes of the blue giant, a flash of green light, and then there was suddenly a hole the size of a human head on the left side of the giant's chest, right over where the heart should be in a person. The giant stood for another second, before falling over forward, dead. Turning his gaze towards the succubus, Issei managed a weak smile, before he fell over, unconscious, his left hand returning to normal. Chapter end. Oh, snap. Who expected something like this to happen to Issei on his very first day in Amsterdam? What will happen to our hero in consecutive chapters? What's this whole deal around a single succubus? Find out in the next chapter. Please remember to leave a review with your thoughts about the story, chapter, and, if you want to, send me a PM and I'll do my best to answer to it. Bye. Previous ch2 of 47 next, chapter 3. Pretty odd. Well, look who the cat dragged in. Or, well, the dragon. That makes more sense. Anyways, welcome to the response section of this chapter, where I'll be addressing reviews that pose questions, doubts or inquiries and giving them the appropriate responses, in my opinion, at least. The Compass creator says, great start. Did not realize Issei would be going alone. Let's hope Harold and Animal don't get him hooked on weed. Good idea starting with non-Christian mythos. Curious to see how many succubi live in this land of perverts. Yeah, Issei went alone, his parents are just cool like that. Or it might be, his mom trying to prevent awkwardness. After what he witnessed of his parents, being forced to stay in the same hotel as them, possibly in the same suite, in one of the world's capitals of sex. Awkward as all hell, I'd wager. About Harold and Animal. I have no idea what this is in reference to, would anyone explain it so that I can understand? About starting with the non-Christian mythos, there is a reason why I set the first true arch away from Kuo, where a sacred gear user can't take half a step outside of their home before getting the Gremory and Sea Tree peerages sniffing around their homes. Plus, there's so much the world has to offer in the way of mythology, and even more from the minds of other authors, writers, and even my own, and giving these the time and space to flourish. Sounds like a damn good idea. About the succubi in Amsterdam thing. Less than you'd expect, for reasons you'll see later on. Fangs of Death says, well, this has potential to be a good story. I look forward to see how it goes. Will Asia be a part of the harem or will she be a sister to Issei? Good luck with this story. I'm glad you think so, and I look forward to seeing where this story will take me as well. And about whether Asia will be part of his harem or something else. You'll just have to keep reading to find out. And thanks for the well wishes. Fenrir44 says, say will the succubus be a OC or she from another manga, anime series, and if she is will other anime gals come into play here? The answer to both of those questions is to wait and see. Can't be spilling the beans early on, can I? Tribus says, I'm back. Amsterdam, huh? That's pretty interesting. I personally thought you'd go straight into Kuo, but this is pretty refreshing. A new world to build, as in, world to describe and such, with the same old perverted boy. The succubus scene was neat. Although there was no build up to her showing up, it was still a nice scene. Also, Issei still has his boosted gear. Lovely. I look forward to your next update. Tribus, Yup, Amsterdam. While I have no idea about the city's layout in and of itself, I know of relevant cultural references about it, so I felt it interesting to add to the story. About Kuo, most of the stories revolve around it, and that won't be different here as Kuo will get its well-earned attention eventually. Until then, we'll have ourselves some fun in Amsterdam. About the lack of build-up for the succubus appearing, that was intentional. Can't say any more than that without spoiling stuff, and I'm glad it still feels nice. The boosted gear, to me, feels like one of the most intrinsic and underexplored main characteristic of Issei, so I don't feel like taking it away. In case people want to read about Issei having other powers, I'm more in the give him more camp than the replace what's already there one. The last Nanaya says, other MILFs may be fair game huh? Fair enough. Hope Issei will be an accidental Netori guy in the future. Yes, other MILFs may be fair game, and it truly is quite fair, for Issei, on the subject of Netori. Issei may Netori someone else later on, he may not. It might be an accident, or it might be on purpose. It all depends on what I feel like should happen later on, so you'll have to stick with story out to find out. Some kinda cool thing says. Now that Issei's awakened his sacred gear, I'm looking forward to seeing him develop the various powers he needs for the harem. Is he gonna start experimenting with things like X-ray vision and such? Issei will be doing lots of experimenting, but neither me or him are sure about this X-ray thing. Phew. So that was today's response corner. Enjoy the story. Pain was the first thing Issei felt as soon as he woke up. It was not as bad as he expected after the stunt he pulled, to be quite honest, but quite bad still. He slowly forced his eyes open, wincing lightly at the painful jab of light in his eye while allowing his vision to regain focus. When his eyes found full focus, Issei found himself staring up at a spotty, stained, low ceiling, with what looked like bits of dew and mold here and there. That, plus the quite uncomfortable bed underneath him, the shoddy and honestly quite tacky wallpaper, and the fact that the television across from him was an old patch job CRT with one of those wire antennae, told him that he was somewhere where he would definitely never take a girl to after a date, which is a cheap motel. Having finished observing as much of the room as his neck allowed him to, Issei allowed his mind to wander back to the events he remembered from the previous night. A succubus, some giant blue dude with ice powers, and, apparently, a hidden superpower. Now, most people in this situation would be freaking out about all of this. After all, having your entire worldview flipped upside down in the course of what had to be like, 30, maybe 45 minutes, had a tendency to do some mental unbalancing of the individual. Holy shit, I'm totally the type of character that ends up getting in the harem situations. Not Hyodo Issei, no siree. He has all the mental unbalance already there, alongside various layers of trauma and delusion. Something as minor as the existence of the impossible isn't enough to take away his drive. I feel kind of bad though. On one hand, I killed someone yesterday night. On the other hand, he did try to kill me first, and he prevented me from getting oral sex for the first time. So there is a sense of satisfaction in here as well, wrestling with that. I think I'm also kind of numb and in shock as I try to repress that memory, because that's the only explanation I'm comfortable with about why I'm not freaking out more about what happened. Before he could continue with his train of thought, Issei witnessed a side door opening out into the room he was in, a curtain of steam billowing outwards, before the girl, succubus, Issei, from the previous day stepped out. Completely naked. The most likely reason as to why Issei's nose didn't erupt into a geyser of blood was the fact that he lost enough blood yesterday that the pressure wasn't enough. It was still high enough, however, to cause another physical reaction, lower down his body. Even with most of his body battered and sore, Issei Jr. still stood at attention, responding to the call to arms that was the scene in front of him. The girl, who had been toweling her hair dry, stopped for an instant, her nose twitching twice before she took in a deep breath, a satisfaction blooming in her face akin to that of someone smelling their favorite perfume. She turned halfway towards Issei, allowing him to see her figure in profile and truly marvel at just how much her chest and behind tastefully protruded from her body, while her own eyes were locked onto the magnificent tent that Issei was making under the covers. She licked her lips hungrily, causing a chill to run down Issei's spine, while Issei Jr. all but danced, causing a bobbing and weaving motion under the sheets that the girl's eyes accompanied with her eyes. She turned fully towards Issei, bearing herself fully to him, her full, perky breasts tipped with penny-sized areola and eraser-sized, fully erect, nipples, a flat stomach with the light outline of abdominal showing just how fit she was, proportionally sized, sinuous waist that led to thick, juicy thighs, before going down to her. Thank you arrow gods, WHO have offered this blessing upon your devout follower. The girl moved. But one couldn't exactly call it walking. She sashayed towards the bed, Issei's eyes all but rolling in their sockets as they tried to choose whether to accompany the results of her movement on her breasts, to lock themselves on her hips and thighs, or to lock themselves to her pink, slightly puffy, hairless. You owe me a meal, handsome. A goofy smile came over Issei's face as the girl reached the feet of the bed, bending over forwards in a move that caused her cleavage to dip down sensually, before slowly, painfully slowly climbing onto the bed. On all fours, she started crawling up the bed towards Issei, giving his hidden member a light bat with her finger before climbing over his waist, allowing his member to nestle itself between her soft, round, plump cheeks. Seeing the boy all but drooling put a wicked smile on her face, and left her confident enough in his distraction not to notice as she unfurled her wings and tail from behind her, a pair of horns slowly manifesting from her head while her body emitted potent pheromones. She leaned down over the boy, her breast smashing onto his chest and perpetually red lips a hair's breadth away from his own, before she spoke. Thanks for the meal. Then, she puckered up her lips, before slowly going down for the kiss. Ooh, this was unbelievable. This right here was the stuff of dreams and legends amongst perverts of Issei's caliber. The lustful haze allowed him to forget everything that was said about succubi the previous night, until a secondary haze tried to cloud over his mind, one that he noticed did not come from the inside, but instead from outside. It was an odd feeling, one that his mind tried shouting out loud about how foreign, how not genuine it felt, but the cries were slowly drowned out by the shouts from Issei Jr. as he took command of Issei's actions. Until a jolt of that same warm energy from the previous day cleared his head of the haze, allowing him to see the horns, wings and tail possessed by the very dangerous girl that was slowly leaning down to kiss him. Ooh, it happened all in an instant. 1 second, she was about to kiss the boy. The next moment she found herself flipped around, her back to the bed and an arm next to her face. Her pleased smirk at the display of lust and dominance faded when she noticed the serious look on his face, and the way his eyes were focused completely on her own, no straying to her body, and no signs of swimming, glassiness, or any other indicator of a lack of control. Oh God, not again. Uncaring about the situation that could be considered threatening, especially with a boy who had enough power to one-shot an enemy she didn't even manage to scratch, the girl decided to vent her built-up frustrations. It happens again, and again, every single time I try to feed. Whenever I find a nice target that would give me a good meal, something happens to interrupt it. Be it a police car passing through, parents with children showing up just as things were getting good, the random dog trying to hump my leg, or even a sudden case of naked granny-induced loss of erection. Issei could only watch, bewildered, as the girl's rant kept escalating in volume and content. I'm a fucking succubus in Amsterdam. How hard should it be to find someone willing to blow a quick load? Apparently it's astronomically hard, and not in the good way. Between the competition with the locals, and the people coming here just to experience the novelty of actual paid sex, I haven't had a drop in me, ever. I can barely keep myself alive by invading the dreams of people. Do you have any idea how hungry a girl can get? Issei blinked owlishly even as she continued. Mother was right when she told me to avoid Amsterdam, but I had to go and be stubborn as always. It's Amsterdam. How hard could it be to feed? And just look at the results. I'm a mostly starved, poorly living, fucking virgin. And I can't go back home to mom because otherwise she'll get all smug and give me those annoying looks. Issei tried moving away from the ranting girl, only for his arm to throb in pain, causing him to heavily fall sideways on the bed, attracting the girl's attention. Just look at this, I'm right here, naked and in bed with a lecherous, virginal teen, and I can't even get him to seal the deal. I'm a fucking mess. Issei blinked owlishly again, before a question managed to slip past his lips. How do you know I was a pervert? The girl rolled her eyes, before answering in a very obvious tone. Tantric energy. The brunette tilted his head, question marks floating over his head as he asked. Tantric energy? The succubus nodded at that, before answering in a noticeably put-upon tone. The energy that is released as a direct consequence of lustful thoughts and actions, and that as succubi primarily feed on. Most people can only release small amounts even while checking a girl or guy out, or fantasizing about them. You release such an absurdly large amount of tantric energy that I felt you all the way in your hotel room. Wait. If so, you don't feed on people's souls, or life force, or whatever? She rolled her eyes again, before answering. We succubi can feed on people's life force, not souls, but as a general norm we don't do it, since it's an extremely non-sustainable feeding method. Tantric energy is something that pretty much anyone aware of sex can produce at any one moment with the right stimulus. So you can feed on someone's tantric energy, come back a few hours later and eat again, as long as their libido is good enough. Good, renewable, sustainable food source which doesn't hurt anyone. The brunette's interest was fully focused on the explanation, as it pertained to his favorite subject in the world, which is sex. Eating people's life force. It might be more filling in the short term, according to what I've heard, but it's bad business in the long term as people with less life force have less time and energy to dedicate to lust and general lasciviousness, making it more worthwhile to just drain them dry at one moment, which reduces a future source of possible tantric energy. Plus, it tends to bring the attention of the supernatural factions. Angels and fallen send exorcists to kill you. Devils for the most part try to bring you into their servitude as slaves and bed warmers. No respect for us hard-working, cocksucking folks, I tell you that. Hearing that she did not intend to drain him dry of his life, Issei allowed himself to exhale out in relief, before speaking up. That's really good to know. I was thinking that I'd have to fight you off to keep from dying, and while I might have managed to kill you, I would have died in the process as well. It was the girl's turn to eye Issei warily as she responded. You speak really easily of killing me, and you deliberately used a killing blow on that guy yesterday. You're not some sort of sociopathic psycho-killer, are you? No, not at all. I just happen to really like living. When you're dealing with certain people, or certain types of people, defeating them and leaving them alive is just giving them the opportunity to kill you or the people you care for at a later date. Sometimes you need to take a more definitive stance. Speaking of, what was that guy from yesterday? And what's your name? I'm tired of thinking about you as girl, or succubus. I understand. Seeing things from that angle, it makes it less bad. About that guy from yesterday, he was a Jotun, an ice giant, sometimes called frost giants, from the realm of Jotunheim, from Nordic mythology. Big, strong and tough with powers related to ice, they're supposedly very difficult to defeat, requiring the strength level at the scale of an Asgardian to even get them to feel it. And then you went and one-shot it. Blinking at the info dump, Issei almost missed her next words. And my name's Lilith. Misinterpreting Issei's vacant look for incredulousness, she spoke on. Yeah, I know, it's pretty presumptuous that I was named after the progenitor of our species. But hey, Mom had high expectations of me. And just look at me fulfilling each and every single one of them. Her sarcastic tone was accompanied by the sweeping of an arm, indicating the barely passable room, before she leaned back into the bed with crossed arms. Taking that as his cue to talk, Issei spoke up. Well, Lilith, my name is Hyodo Issei, I know. Seeing his questioning look, she shrugged before answering. Your ID is in your wallet and I had to take money from it to pay for this room, and I have to tell you it wasn't cheap. Shitty as it may be, it was the only place willing not to ask any questions or call the authorities when they saw me carrying your unconscious almost corpse. Oh, thanks, I guess. You're welcome. The two lied there in an awkward silence, before Lilith turned towards Issei, her tone hesitant as she spoke. Issei. Will you have sex with me? The sacred gear user choked on air, wincing as he felt his ribs protesting against his coughing, before speaking up, tears in the corners of his eyes. What? I want you to have sex with me, Issei. Look, I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I'm sick of having those snide bitches I call cousins always ragging on about how I'm still a virgin. Hey look, it's no man Lilith. Lilith the unbettable, the virginal princess. I'm tired of it. So please, Issei, have sex with me. Ooh, he wanted to say yes. By the gods, one cannot accurately measure in numbers how much willingness Issei possessed. If one tried to quantify it, they'd reach a final result the square root of purple times the density of a black hole squared. However, I refuse. The reluctance in his tone was clearly audible, and the tone itself wasn't very convincing, as every single instinct of his fought hard to overturn the decision, with Issei Jr. all but mentally kicking Issei proper, however his morals and reason prevailed. Why not? Am I unappealing? Do you think I'm ugly, Issei? He had to force his head to the side as his eyes locked on her juicy, pouting lips, the whining, needy tone of hers caressing his ears. Yet Issei was a man of faith, and he would not be driven aside. I refused to do it like this." Before she could respond, Issei continued. "A pervert's virginity only holds as much weight as the situation under which they lost it. I intended to lose my virginity in a momentaneous occasion, such as the first time I told a girl that I loved her, or when I got the first member of my harem. I don't want my virginity to be forfeited on a whim." His spirits burning high, Issei suppressed his libido with absolute control as he kept speaking, his earnestness reflected in his eyes. "And I think you deserve better as well. Having sex. It is one of the biggest expressions of trust a person can offer another. They are literally putting their body, and their pleasure, in each other's hands. You should do it with someone that you really trust, for the right reason. Not with some random pervert out of a compulsion or peer pressure. Hold on to your virginity for now, and if you wish me to take it from you, then you'll just have to fall in love with me, and make me fall in love with you as well. Then, I'll do whatever you ask me to your sexy, sexy body." Ooh. Seeing how serious the boy covered in bruises and bandages was as he spoke about not having sex with her so that he could take her virginity, Lilith couldn't really help it. PFF'd. Ha 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 ha. She laughed, a loud, undignified thing, interspersed with various unladylike snorts, being totally at odds with the general aura of sensuality and sexuality that hung around her at all times, and yet, to Issei, it was an amazing sound nonetheless. "You are a very interesting person, Hyodo Issei." She watched Issei's face scrunch up in confusion, in a manner that she'd admit she considered cute, before inwardly nodding to herself. Crossing her arms and lifting her nose into the air in fake arrogance, and speaking in a mock haughty tone, Lilith made a declaration. "I cannot bear the injury to my pride which is being denied by a pervert such as yourself, Hyodo Issei, so I have decided. I will stay with you from now on. I will take your virginity, which I claim to rightfully belong to me and no one else, and I will keep you as my own source of food and entertainment until such a time comes as me getting tired of you." Seeing his still blank look, she sighed in exasperation, before clarifying thing. "I'm staying with you so that I can feed on your tantric energy, and I'll try as often as I can to tempt you into giving me your virginity." A bout of shyness came over Lilith as the taunts from her peers flashed through her mind, reminding her of how unlikable she supposedly is, causing her to speak up more hesitantly. "That is, if you'll have me. Are you freaking crazy? Of course you can come with me. I have no objections to most of what you said. And even that virginity part, any objection from me is half-hearted at best." And just like that, Issei, unknowingly, got the first member of his harem. 2 days later, stretching out his no longer sore arm as he left the motel accompanied by Lilith, Issei spoke up. "Man, I didn't think I'd get back to feeling this good soon. I thought I'd be in bed for the rest of my trip." Smirking in a self-satisfied manner, Lilith spoke up. "You're welcome. Wait, you did this? You healed me?" Her tone smug, the succubus answered. "Of course. With the amount of tantric energy you make available, using the needed healing spells was a breeze." Seeing him stop mid-step, Lilith stopped as well. "What's wrong, Issei?" She turned to look at the boy, only to see his eyes all but shining as he asked in an excited tone. "Healing spells, like with magic? Magic is real?" Lilith had to roll her eyes at that, resuming her walk as Issei had done so as well, as she spoke. "Yes, magic is real. I think you figured that one out, between the succubus, the Jotun and the sacred gear." "Sacred gear? That was that thing that I used, right? The one with the boom, pow, whoosh." A sweat drop on her forehead, Lilith answered. "If you're referring to the power that you used, then yes, that's a sacred gear. Sacred gear pretty much refers to the power that a few humans naturally possess, intrinsically linked with their souls, which the biblical God afforded humans so that they could defend themselves against the supernatural world. Each of them has a specific power, set of powers, or properties, with the 13 strongest being given the title of Longinus, the 13 sacred gears which, if used properly, grant the users the power to kill a god." Wow. Raising his left hand and turning it to either side, Issei's eyes searched for some type of physical mark of their existence as he spoke. "Do you have any idea what sacred gear I have, or how I use it?" The purplet tapped her chin with her finger for a bit, thinking out loud. "Now that you speak about it, I didn't really have the chance to take a look at it. What with trying not to die against that ice asshole. and how to use. Just try to remember how you felt when it first appeared, and how it made you feel afterwards, and try to call up that feeling from your memories." Raising his closed left fist in front of his face, Issei's brow furrowed as he whispered, "Remember how it felt." Unaware of this, Lilith kept absent-mindedly speaking. "Don't get discouraged if you can't get it on the first try. Most humans don't have a good aptitude with magic, so." Ha! Issei's hand was encased in a bright flash of green light, and when said flash vanished, Lilith felt the breath knocked out of her. While Issei clenched and unclenched his fist in fascination, admiring the cool and responsive form of his sacred gear, Lilith's mind was rushing and whirling with a whirlwind of thoughts. Spiky red gauntlet? Green, glowing jewel? Yellow accents? The ability to make even a human as magically powerful as a high-class being in a short time period? Issei, that's the boosted gear, one of the 13 Longinus. Hearing that, Issei's eyes widened as he gained a new appreciation of his new power. Wow, one of the God Slayer weapons, that's so cool. No, Issei, that's so not cool. The brunette blinked at the succubus' panicked tone, but she kept speaking on without giving him a chance to interject. The 13 Longinus are some of the most powerful, most sought-after artifacts in the whole world. The supernatural world is known to seek out and try to recruit most humans that possess a shred of talent, or any sort of useful sacred gear. Do you know what would happen if they became aware that you have one of the 13 Longinus? Various different factions would do whatever they felt necessary to either try to recruit you, or, if they felt your allegiance was impossible for them to gain or that it was too much effort for the end result, kill you. They'd go after you, your family and everyone you love, with the intent of either enslaving or destroying you. Holy crap. Then I have to keep this hidden at all costs. She gave the boy a pitying look as she spoke. Sorry, Issei, but that's not how it works. Your sacred gear gets its power from one of the most powerful beings to ever exist. Why Diedrich Gok, the heavenly red dragon. Dragons are beings that exert let's say passive energy, that invariably garners attention, both good and bad, from allies, mates, and friends, to adversaries, rivals, opponents and enemies. The more powerful the dragon, the more powerful this aura is. Fuck, that's bad. You don't know the half of it. Let me put it in perspective. A few thousand years ago, before my mother's birth, there was a massive war between the 3 biblical factions. This war was fought between the angels, led by God, the devils, led by the 4 Satans, and the fallen angels, led by Azazel, and it threatened to destroy the world. It most probably would had it continued raging. The reason why the Great War stopped was due to 2 very powerful beings, Albion the White Heavenly Dragon, and Diedrich, the Red Heavenly Dragon. The 2 are eternal rivals, locked into combat through the annals of history. One of their battles led to them appearing in one of the Great War's battlefields during actual combat, and the collateral damage from their bout was so bad that the 3 factions temporarily ceased conflict and converged on the 2 with the intent of defeating them. The dragons didn't even attempt to defend themselves, so focused on their own fight, but they were eventually taken down, and sealed into sacred gears. The sheer damage that attempting to defeat them while distracted caused to the 3 biblical factions was so bad that they entered an immediate ceasefire that has persisted up until now. Looking down at his gauntleted arm, Issei gained a new appreciation for the power that he had been given, literally, by God. Holy crap. This is worse than I thought. What can I do? Stop bitching and moaning and get stronger. Both Issei and Lilith jumped at the powerful, gruff voice that emanated from the boosted gear as if it were a set of speakers, before Lilith responded tentatively. Mr. Red Dragon, sir. No, the Easter Bunny. Of course I'm the Red Dragon. I'm in the boosted gear, am I not? Oh wow, the Easter Bunny is real as well? That has to be one of the most idiotic questions I've ever heard. Of course the Easter Bunny isn't real. Crossing his arms defensively, Issei spoke up. Well, it could be. How? How could the Easter Bunny be real when Easter is all about Jesus? How would a dragon sealed away thousands of years ago be aware of the existence of the Easter Bunny if it did not exist back then? Lilith actually blinked at that. That is actually a great question. Doesn't sound that idiotic now, does it? That doesn't matter right now. Issei's whispered, because you're wrong, was either unheard or ignored, as Diedrich continued speaking. As you girlfriend over there, Lilith sputtered and started throwing around denials at that, said, We are invariably going to attract both positive and negative attention. That is inevitable. The only thing you can do is prepare. Fortunately enough, you don't seem to be a total waste of my totally amazing power. You invoked it on your own through sheer willpower in its actual primary form, instead of in the basic, twice critical, form that the weaklings generally have to work up from, and I have to admit to be extremely surprised about the manner in which you defeated that Jotun, drawing an amount of power beyond your body's ability to withstand and then compressing it outside of your body. It was a big gamble, but one that worked, and with very impressive results. If you manage to apply this level of ingenuity to the way you use the boosted gear, you may not be such a weakling for long, which is great since I don't want my host embarrassing me in front of the white one. What's that you said about a white one? Unimportant. What's important right now is that you need an out-of-the-way place where you can train without revealing yourself to the world. I may know of a place. Issei and Diedrich both shifted their focus onto Lilith, waiting for her to follow up on her latest sentence, which she did after some hesitation. I know of somewhere we can go, and it's highly likely that your identity will be kept a secret. But it will be very dangerous, Issei. For your chastity, I mean. The boy's eyes widened as he squeaked out a, "What?" while Diedrich spoke after a few seconds of silence. And where is this place? It's a city in Germany, one that humanity, and even most of the supernatural world is unaware of. It's the sanctuary and homeland of succubi, protected by a special set of magical spells allowing passage only to succubi, their mates, and distinguished guests, invited by members of the royal family. It's the state city of Luxuria. I've heard of Luxuria, but I thought they were only rumors. To think that that place actually existed. If you can guarantee us privacy and anonymity, there should be no problem with going there. Looking at Issei, Lilith spoke. Issei, Luxuria is the world's capital of sex and lust for a reason. Pretty much the entire population is constantly releasing the same magical aura that I did to put you in a lustful haze. And with the amount of tantric energy that you produce, there is pretty much a 0% chance that you won't be propositioned, or even attacked as long as you're there. And I won't be able to protect you from it. You'll have to try to resist, and probably even fight off your attackers on your own. So, my bags are already packed, I just need to get them at my hotel. Diedrich could only sigh at his host's peculiarities. Chapter end. Another chapter, done. Please tell me what you think of it by leaving a review below, and feel free to PM me if you want to. This is Franco Gamer XZ, out. First, previous ch3 of 47 next. Chapter 4. Relativistic time is absolute bull heya, it's a me, again. You know how the drill goes. This is the response section of the chapter. Or it would be had people had, you know, actual questions. This time around I got assertions and exclamations more than anything else. Which is good as it means that the last chapter was concise and did not confuse people, but makes me miss out on a bit of fan interaction. So, instead of a response corner, I'll just jump straight ahead into the story. Enjoy. Ooh, this is very menacing. Are you sure this is the only way to go? Issei's concern was more than warranted, as he and his companion stood in front of a dark, creepy forest, with massive trees, and that released the feeling of malice and watching eyes. It was enough to unnerve pretty much anyone else in his situation. Lilith, for her part, looked as calm as a cucumber as she responded. I know that it's not the most inviting sight, but it's the best way forward. Between your parents only being willing to finance your trip and stay in Amsterdam, the lack of a visa to Germany and your unwillingness to use official channels lest your parents be made aware of your meandering, this is the only possibility. The possibility Lilith spoke of was the Twilight Forest. A dimensional abnormality in the fact that it was not exclusively at any one place at any one time. While thorough, comprehensive understanding of the forest was all but impossible to get, almost as if the forest itself did its best not to be found out, it was a well-known fact that anyone that stepped into the forest could get anywhere in they desired in the world as long as they knew the proper paths, had the right magical artifacts to allow for navigation, or were incredibly, stupidly lucky. Lilith, like all other succubi, was always capable of finding her way through the forest back to her home, since they are all physically and spiritually attuned to constantly feel the sheer amount of tantric energy and pheromones hanging around the place, so she trusted her senses to guide them through. Trying to shrug off the creepy feeling of being watched and deciding to trust his companion, Issei followed after Lilith as she walked into the forest. So, Lilith. Are you really sure there aren't any creepy crawlies just waiting to jump us and eat our spleens? Because I have to tell you, I really like my spleen. You could even say I'm very attached to it." Neither Lilith nor Diedrich dignified that absolutely horrid joke with a response, knowing that it was just Issei trying to distract himself from his fear, while Issei laughed at himself in an attempt to ward off the feeling of a predatory gaze that persisted over him from the moment he first stepped into the forest. The two walked for a while in a tense silence, the sounds of leaves and grass crunching under their feet as they took step after step filling the air, until Lilith whirled towards Issei, her claws already out as she allowed her eyes to roam around the area, assessing any possible threats even as she spoke. "What's wrong, Issei? Did you see any movement? I need to go pee." Lilith felt herself trip in place, barely resisting the impetus to faceplant, while Diedrich could only ask himself why he had to get such an idiotically talented host. "Couldn't I get a host that's only talented?" Recomposing herself, Lilith spoke in an exasperated tone. "Go on behind a tree then, I'll wait for you right here." Nodding rapidly, Issei ran around a certain tree, before he opened his zipper and let it fly. "Ah. Been holding onto that one since Amsterdam." After shaking himself clean and reholstering his rifle, Issei walked back around the tree to meet up with Lilith. Only to be met with an empty clearing. Oh shit, this is giving me total horror movie vibes. What if Lilith's been attacked by a carnivorous lamb that eats people's faces? What if I'm the next one? God, I don't wanna die. Before Diedrich could say a thing about his host's dramatic shouting, the two heard Lilith's voice coming from slightly away from them. "This way, Issei." The brunette turned towards the source of the voice, only to see a trail of purple hair moving amongst the treeline. Feeling a sense of relief at his companion's presence, Issei dashed heartily chased after her, tears of relief in his eyes. "Lilith, I'm here." He crossed past the tree she had moved around, only to witness Lilith leaning on a tree further ahead, her hand covering her mouth as she giggled coyly, before slipping around the tree and jogging away. Inflamed by the playful act, Issei decided to chase after Lilith, not really noticing how the forest around him shifted and twisted, until some of the ground became cobbled. He stopped in the middle of an empty clearing, no traces of Lilith other than a giggle in the wind. Following said giggle, Issei made his way past a tall bush, only to find himself entering a small, medieval-looking village, made mostly out of wood and stone. He was in a village, watching throngs of beautiful women in various states of dress walk around the village, some of them whispering amongst themselves and giggling, others carrying buckets of water, while some still paused, giving him an evaluating look before giving him sultry smiles, capable of making any man's pulse race. Looking around the village, Issei noticed the rustic living standards, before he listened to Lilith's giggle again. Turning towards it, he saw a blur of purple rushing down the main street, prompting him to follow. He walked for quite a few minutes until the street shrank into a narrow, winding path through another wooded section. Making his way through the wooded section, Issei was absolutely surprised by the sight that emerged. Suddenly, in front of him, was a massive castle, with many towers and battlements, and narrow slits amongst the stone playing the roles of windows from which to operate bows. The whole ensemble was made in a smooth, black stone, one that gave the impression of absorbing the light around it, and that, even without being near it, Issei could swear was absolutely cold to the touch. Seeing no one else around, Issei kept walking down the path and into the castle, finding it very odd that the massive double doors into it were wide open. He traversed the various halls made in the same black material, adorned with various sets of armor, and paintings of decidedly serpentine nature. Snakes, big snakes, small snakes, really big snakes, winged snakes, snakes of various different colors. It was all there, represented in the paintings. Funnily enough, the frames of the paintings held small engravings of various snakes as well, and even the armors and the weapons they brandished had crests of snakes all over. Ignoring all the creepy Voldemort vibes the place was giving him, Issei kept moving through the castle, trepidation gradually rising as he found not a single living being. Eventually he reached a grandiose pair of doors, 3 times as tall as he was, and 4 times as wide as he himself was tall, made out of a bronze-colored metal, and bearing the same serpentine engravings as everything else in the forest. A pair of green-colored door handles were close together in the middle of the door, green, scaled patterns adorning them. When he touched them, Issei felt a scaly sensation that he'd expect from touching a real snake. Ignoring the way the handles vibrated like actual, hissing snakes, Issei pushed them down and the doors forward, only to end up in a massive hall. The walls adorned with all forms of snake-related paintings, similarly themed statues littering the room, and a dark green carpet under his feet, leading towards a throne. An occupied throne. An occupied throne. Sat on by a nude woman, her breasts bared and her modesty preserved only by her crossed legs, with two topless maids standing deferentially behind and to the sides of her throne. Ho! It seems that a cute little morsel has reached my humble abode. The way in which she spoke, the way she said the word morsel should have triggered red flags in Issei's brain, especially with how much it sounded similar to Lilith calling him tasty, except way more malicious. However, boobs. That's pretty much the thing preventing Issei from thinking properly. After all, with a pair of juicy, succulent, pendulous breasts, bared for your viewing pleasure, who would care about something as measly and unimportant as their health and well-being? And what is your name, darling? Is Issei, ma'am. Issei. Well met Issei. I am Steno, mistress of serpents and purveyor of entertainment most pleasant. Tell me, Issei, how is it that you found yourself in my castle, in my land? Oh, well, I was sort of chasing after a friend, and I guess I got lost. The woman on the throne tilted to the side in interest, her waist moving in a much too sinuous manner, almost as if such a thing as a spine did not limit the type of movements she can make, but rather than alarm him, it only caused him to see stars, a small trickle of blood going down his nose. Oh my. Do not worry, Issei, it is likely that the two of you will be meeting each other, but until then, I'd like to offer you my roof for you to sleep under. What do you say, imhum? Issei nodded frantically at that, not wanting to stay outdoors a stone's toss from the creepy forest, prompting Steno to chuckle heartily at that, before speaking. Quilla, my aide, shall direct you to the room you will be utilizing, Issei. With a snap of her fingers the girl to the back and left of the throne took a step forwards to show Issei whom Steno had referred to. She was a beautiful woman, her hair a stark white reaching her shoulders in an asymmetrical bob, and her narrow eyes colored an exotic, hawk-like yellow. She had a smile on her face, though it visibly did not reach her eyes. She was about 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a lean, athletic build like one would expect from a runner, long, powerful-looking legs, and a sensible pair of B-cup breasts. She bowed towards Issei, before speaking up. It will be my pleasure to attend to Master Issei's desires. Listening to that line should have sent Issei over the moon. However, he managed to notice the reluctance with which Quilla had said it, which brought him back down to earth as far as the castle was concerned. At that moment he felt a fog clearing from his mind, one somewhat like the haze that Lilith's aura caused him, but different. If Lilith's haze could be described as purple, this one had to definitely be green. Being experienced with hiding emotional distress and playing the fool at a moment's notice, Issei managed to hide the fact that whatever it was that had been blinding him from the red flags so far had vanished, and her gave Quilla a massive, lecherous grin even as he spoke. I think I'll enjoy my stay here. Issei and Quilla walked through the castle halls in a tense silence, Quilla ways ahead of Issei ensuring that her frown was unseen, and Issei's relaxed pace and countenance hiding the fact that his mind was a whirlwind of activity as he tried to figure out just what was happening around him. He's chasing after Lilith. Then she runs away from him, then this castle. And he didn't even notice how weird it was for the most part due to some sort of mind manipulation magic. Absolutely suspicious. Looking around the room and taking a second, closer look at the snake imagery, Issei felt the return of the unsettling sensation of being watched hungrily by a predator. The two turned a corner, and as soon as the sensation of being watched faded, Issei spoke up. What's really happening here? The topless, sharp-eyed maid looked at Issei from the corner of her eye, before muttering lowly. You're not as oblivious as you seem. Good. You might actually make it out of here alive. Before Issei could respond in any way Quilla turned back forward, and the sensation of being watched returned as a set of armor with a serpent engraving came into view. His own eyes narrowed at that. So I'm being watched whenever there are snakes in view. Good to know. With that notion firmly planted in his mind, Issei followed Quilla up a few sets of stairs to the 3rd floor, directing him towards the first door on the right. Issei got the feeling that he was being watched even in his temporary bedchambers, especially in his bedchambers, which was absolutely unsettling. Having someone watch me so hungrily even in bed. Freaking hell, I'll go crazy if I spend too much time here. These are your chosen chambers, master. You can rest here to recover your strength." Her neutral tone turned as bland as the smile on her face as she spoke. "Please, do not hesitate to come to me if you have any issues, as I am available to fulfill all of your needs." Issei responded by shrugging, before Quilla bowed, causing the boy's eyes to glue themselves to the pendulous motion of her breasts and drool to escape his lips, before walking out of the room, her face set in a stern frown. Now alone, Issei looked around the room, seeing that it had a few suits of armor and paintings arranged in a tasteful, if overly pompous manner. Tossing himself to his bed, the brunette decided to focus inward and talk to his partner. "Diedrich, you there?" He heard what sounded distinctly like a snore, causing a sweatdrop to roll down his forehead. "Seems like I'm doing this one alone, but before that, I need to rest." With that, Issei allowed himself to go to sleep after hours of running. Breakfast the next day was a really awkward affair. It wasn't the weird vibes of the place, or the way that it seemed the eyes in the various paintings were following his every motion, or even the fact that his partner seemed to not give a rat's ass about his distress and preferred sleeping on instead. It was more due to the fact that he couldn't really focus on his food with a hot, unashamedly nude brunette sitting across him, her legs splayed wide and a predatory look in her eyes. The fact that she periodically licked her lips didn't help much either. His growling stomach brought him back to the most important matter of the moment, food. He loaded a fork up with eggs, only to see Quilla all but trying to murder him with her eyes, causing him to give up on the eggs. Dropping the eggs, he allowed his fork to hover over the bacon, getting another death glare. He noticed her glare soften as his fork stopped over the sausages, giving him the all clear. He was ravenous in the consuming of sausages, and as soon as they were gone he pushed the plate away. "Issei, dear," Stino spoke up, "aren't you going to finish your breakfast?" "Oh, I'm already full, Miss Stino." The woman pouted at Issei, causing him to squeeze the bridge of his nose to stem a nosebleed, before Quilla spoke up. "Your bath has already been prepared, mistress." Stino nodded at that, before responding. "Very good, Quilla, me and Issei will be there in a bit." "Wait, what?" If he had trouble focusing during breakfast, then it was nothing compared to what his mind was going through right now as he stood outside the bath chamber door, wearing only a towel around his waist and nothing more. He could barely rein in his excitement, with Issei Jr. posing a constant threat of embarrassment. Breathing in deeply, Issei gathered his wits and knocked on the door. "Enter." He opened the door, took one step inside, then froze. "Join me while the water's warm, Issei. You'd probably freeze too if you were faced with an absolutely hot woman, naked with the exception of foam and soap bubbles covering her privates. This is, somehow, hotter than when she was just fully naked. Dangerous." Issei gulped at that, slowly stepping into the bath that resembled a Greek bathhouse pool more than anything else, allowing a curtain of steam to cover him as he removed the towel from around himself and sunk into the soapy water. He had to let out a pleased sigh at the feel of the warm water soothing him completely. The two stayed in silence for a while, Issei lost in the sensations of his bath, while Stino took Issei's distraction as an opportunity to give him a more thorough look over, before frowning. How could such a mostly average, though she had to admit he had a good face, boy such as him be powerful enough to draw that out? She shrugged that line of thought off, not willing to put more effort in than necessary. He's gonna be food pretty soon anyway. Feeling clean and nice, and wearing a thin set of garments, Issei took the opportunity to climb to the castle's highest level, trying to spot the town that he had initially walked through, only to notice that the entire world around the castle was nothing more than gray mist, causing his expression to harden. Knowing that whatever the event was that targeted him would be occurring soon, Issei decided to prepare. After all, it was never a good idea to mess with a dragon, and with Diedrich, he sorta kinda maybe qualified. Quilla, who had been polishing one of the armors around the castle, found herself suddenly being dragged by the arm by the unfortunate sap that happened to find his way to her mistress' territory, towards what she knew to be his bedroom. Before she could react to her assumptions and show him why he wasn't even fit to gaze upon her, much less touch her, she found herself pushed into an alcove, before he pushed himself in as well, keeping her pressed flat against the castle's stone walls. She opened her mouth intent on lambasting the brutish pervert, arcs of electricity already arcing along her fingers, before she heard him speak in a sailor's tone she thought him incapable of. I know that something weird is happening here. Plans are being made, and I'm probably supposed to be the stooge of the situation. I've noticed the way Stino looks at me hungrily. The way the town that I walked past on the way here doesn't exist anymore. The feeling of being constantly watched. I also noticed the way that you don't seem to be too crazy about following her orders, and the way you glare at her whenever you think no one's looking, so I have a proposition to make. We team up, stop whatever it is that's being planned, then, since you seem to dislike me so much, we go our separate ways. How does that sound? Quilla really had to rethink her opinion of the boy. He wasn't as oblivious as she thought, and he did have enough control to think with his bigger head instead of his smaller one. Nodding at that, she answered. Very well, we work together, but you cannot allow her to notice you're onto her, or she'll find a way to dispose of you even sooner. Seeing that he still seemed serious about things, Quilla continued. Seek out the place where the ramblings of wise men of old lie in rest, and follow the guidance of the Thunderbird. Then, without allowing Issei to say anything else, Quilla went back to her tasks as a servant of the castle, while the brunette sacred gear user racked his brains for the solution to the task given to him. 3 days after his deal with Quilla, Issei was still as far away from finding the place he had been directed to as before, all the while being forced to play nice with a woman that he felt wanted to do bad things to him, the world around the castle gradually disappearing, the fact that this delayed his schedule with Lilith and his trip to Luxuria, and the fact that Diedrich hadn't said a word since they arrived at the castle. Between all of those things, and forcibly suppressing his libido in the presence of the seemingly nudist Stino and her topless maids, Issei was about ready to snap. Case in point, the fact that Stino's other maid, Alex, was chattering away in front of him, and instead of appreciating the way her breathing affected her delightful breasts, or trying to engage her in conversation, he could only smile as he half listened to her, keeping just enough focus on her to be able to give the occasional, or, I see, to make him seem not rude. Mbling, don't you think so? Issei's mind went into complete focus at something he thought he heard, speaking up. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Blinking twice, the perky, airheaded maid spoke in her cheery tone. I said that I could write a book with how much I ramble. Seriously, I feel totes like an old man, and stuff. His eyes widening massively at that, Issei pulled Alex into a massive hug, before turning around and dashing off in a sprint. The airheaded maid could only giggle at Issei's silliness, before going back to doing her job. The ramblings of wise men of old lie in rest. How can words lie in rest after they've been already said? By writing them. And where do books rest? In libraries. I need to go to the library. Issei made his way through the library doors, ending up in a massive room, filled wall to wall with bookshelves, the only indicators about subject being hanging banners with crude pictograms, which due to his lack of knowledge of their context didn't really tell him much. Still, he looked at the banners until he saw what could be said to be a bird of some sort, prompting him to move into that specific aisle. Walking through the aisle, Issei kept his eyes searching through the book covers for any indication of what to do, until he saw what looked like an eagle with its wings spread in flight, clutching a lightning bolt in each talon. The guidance of the Thunderbird. The brunette pulled the book from its place on the shelf, opening it to the page a tab protruded from, only to see a large drawing of a green dragon-like snake coiled tightly around a house, its head pointed upwards and its mouth open in a threatening motion. Said motion was aimed towards a massive yellow bird with a beak surging with electricity. Moving past the picture into the description, Issei's eyes widened as he read further. Few beasts have such enmity amongst themselves as do the Roman Thunderbird and Midgardsummer. The Roman Thunderbird, as a representation of Roman power, nobility and dominance, does not enjoy having its territory encroached upon, which is exactly what Midgardsummer attempted to do. Midgardsummer is called the home-thieving snake dragon for a reason. It moves into occupied territory, feeds on whomever it can, before melding into the ambient structures, lying in wait for further prey to cross an area it has taken control of so that it can feed. When it tried invading Rome, it found itself facing Rome's protection, the one that had gained the moniker of Eagle of Victory in heated battle. The battle between the two raged for 3 days and 3 nights on the outskirts of the city, with it moving ever closer towards Rome proper. Not willing to see the city it protected destroyed in its attempt to protect it, the Thunderbird is said to have summoned a massive bolt of lightning which turned night into day, and when it died down the two were gone, banished elsewhere. No one knows where those two are. Until now. Issei turned around in surprise at the voice in his ear. An evilly smirking Steno being the last thing he saw before a blow to the back of the head rendered him unconscious. "The information that you gave me was valid, slave. Very good of you." Quilla took a step forward from where she stood behind Steno, bowing graciously towards her mistress. Stepping forth from the shadows on the opposite side, Alex giggled at the downed form of Issei, the club she used to knock him out still hoisted over her shoulder, before she spoke. "Silly Issei. Libraries aren't for napping." Steno had to facepalm at her henchwoman's idiocy. "Ooh, woo. What happened?" Issei's tone was groggy and his eyes registered triplicates of everything around him, which were tilted and swaying back and forth, but to be fair to him, he did get clubbed really hard in the head, so it was understandable. He shook his head to try to get rid of the dizziness, which only made it worse, before he settled on allowing his mind to clear of its own volition. As normal sight and sound came back to him, he remembered the events just prior to him getting knocked unconscious. Midgard summer. So the objective is trying to eat me. So why did Steno wait so long? So it seems you got far enough to warrant actual action. Issei's head snapped to the side, his gaze falling onto Quilla, who continued speaking. "Of all the men lured here during the years, you were the one to get the closest to the truth. Such a pity that you were taken down before you could find a way out." "A way out for me or for you, Quilla, or should I say Aquila Victus, the eagle of victory?" The white-haired woman raised an eyebrow at that. "You're sharper than you look, boy." Ignoring the insulting level of surprise in her tone, Issei snorted before smirking smugly. It wasn't too hard to put together. A sharp gaze, narrowed eyes and yellow, hawk-like irises, white hair that kind of reminded me of the bald eagle, and the fact that when I confronted you in that alcove, your fingers were sparking. That by itself didn't tell me anything, but reading the book about the eagle of victory got me thinking. Roman spoke Latin, and what would the Latin for eagle of victory be? Aquila Victus, or something among those lines. And your name just so happens to be Quilla. This time Quilla had to blink in surprise, before speaking in an honestly impressed tone. Impressive deductive capabilities. Of course. Issei started, before a sheepish grin came over his face. The fact that the caption under the picture said, Midgard's OMRX Aquila Victus, in bold definitely helped. Quilla had to facepalm at that one. After a few seconds of silence, Issei spoke up. "So. Why is it that you're working here as a servant? And why did I not get fed to the big snake as soon as I stepped in here?" "I can tell you the answer to both questions, Hyodo Issei." Issei's gaze moved towards the speaker, a smirking Steno clad in a silky, paper-thin white robe which… well, she might as well have been naked. She was flanked by a smiling Alex, who held a golden scepter with the top shaped as a cobra flaring its hood. The reason why the vaunted eagle of victory, that brought prosperity and glory to the Roman Empire is bound here, happens to be moi. Tell me, boy, what do you know of Greek mythology? Not much, really, only the stuff most people know. The various gods, their powers, Hercules, and Aphrodite, my personal favorite deity, followed only by Eros. Other than that. He followed up by shrugging, glad that the ropes tying him to a wooden post were only around him from the biceps to the waist, leaving his shoulders and legs free. "Well, let me tell you a story of 3 sisters. Their names were Euryale, Steno and Medusa, and the 3 were very intelligent, very beautiful, very talented witches. One of them, Medusa, happened to get the attention of Poseidon, one of the Greek gods, yet she refused his advances. Enraged, he snuck up on her as she performed her worship in the temple of Athena, and forced himself on her. Athena, witnessing the scene of her temple being conspurcated yet being incapable of punishing her uncle, decided to punish the woman he raped. He turned her into a hideous beast, whose mere gaze was enough to turn any mortal into stone. When Medusa's sisters, outraged by the injustice, went in front of the Olympian Council and exposed Poseidon's transgression and Athena's injustice, they did not get the result they hoped for, or expected. Instead of finding sympathy or justice in the council, they found majoritarily scorn and anger. Apparently, any mortal should be flattered for the attention of an Olympian, and refusing their advances as grounds for punishment. Anything that occurs to them is considered their own responsibility. What's worse? Not only did the Olympians ignore our pleas for our sister's curse to be removed, they punished the 2 of us as well for daring to speak out about their transgressions as if they were held to the same rules as mortals. Medusa had her beauty taken away, and my sister Euryale had her intelligence taken from her, becoming an absolute airhead and nothing like the woman she previously was. As for me, I started gradually losing my power, and with it my youthfulness and my life force. I was heading for an early grave, and with my powers waning, my ability to delay or reverse this situation was diminishing. In a bout of desperation, me and Euryale decided to find help in other corners of the world, which lead us to the Twilight Forest. We found a castle sitting atop a land that was barren of all things needed to live. We were ready to leave for somewhere else, to try to find a path to somewhere better, only for a massive bolt of lightning to strike the castle, fading to reveal a scorched and almost dying giant snake, and a bird with most of its feathers bloodied or torn. Imagine my surprise when the snake spoke to me. "Help me vanquish my enemy, and I shall give you whatever it is you desire." After getting screwed over by the gods already, I decided not to trust any superior entity offering me free stuff. While the two beings were weak, I used the remainder of my magic to bind Midgardsummer to the castle itself, bound myself to Midgardsummer in order to slowly siphon its power, and bound the Aquila Victus into servitude. I sent the snake into dormancy to not worry about it resisting, but with it sleeping there was another issue: its power was limited. The snake needed to feed to produce more power. So I set up a trap. I create an illusionary field around the area that this castle sits on that lures weak men away from the forest and dulls their minds. I perform a ritual that rouses the snake into a half-awakened state, feed it, and then send it back to sleep. The extra power it generates is sent directly towards me. Once I gather enough power, I'll go back to Greece, and destroy those petty fucking gods. The ritual to rouse Midgardsummer is not an easy thing to perform, depending on the energy of my victim to perform, which is why I lace the food they are to eat with potions that convert their longevity into immediate power. That way they never notice that their energy is being taken, and by the time Midgardsummer is in a good enough state to feed, they're too weak to even try running, or resisting in any way. I expected the same to happen to you, so imagine my surprise when, despite the fact that you were not imbibing the potion, you were managing just fine, or better yet, Midgardsummer was waking up faster than I expected him to. "You must be very powerful, Issei. Feeding you to the snake, I'll finally have the power to overthrow the Olympians, and it's all thanks to you, Issei." The brunette blinked owlishly before turning towards Aquila, his tone as incredulous as his face as he spoke. Did she just explain her plan to me? Like, in its entirety? All of it? Before she managed to fulfill it? Aquila just shrugged at that, causing Issei to shake his head at that. "She's really asking to lose, isn't she?" Closing his eyes and focusing, Issei felt the limitless well of draconic power that was sealed within the boosted gear. He grabbed onto a strand of that power, allowing it to coil itself around him completely before seeping into his body. Opening his eyes and seeing the interested and inquisitive looks on Aquila and Steno's faces, Issei smirked before flexing his arms, causing the ropes tied around him to explode violently off of him. Raising his gauntlet-clad fist, Issei pointed it straight towards Steno, before speaking up. "You lied to me. You bared your flesh to me, allowed me to gaze upon all of you as if I were in your confidence. You fueled my dreams, but you deceived me. Your breasts were not full with the hopes and dreams of mankind. They're full of darkness, lies, deceit and evil. Your breasts are a perversion of the world's natural order." Both Aquila and Steno looked at Issei incredulously, before Steno spoke. "What kind of idiot are you? The kind that distracts people enough to do this? Compression shot." The crack of something breaching the sound barrier filled the air, a green beam of condensed energy streaking towards the distracted Steno faster than she could erect a barrier. Crackum. The crack of thunder filled the clearing a few instants after a bright while flash of light did, revealing Aquila in front of Steno, flesh missing on the arm that she used to block the compression shot in a circular shape. Right then and there, in front of everyone's eyes, electric sparks started filling the hole, and with a tiny flash of light she was as good as new. "That was going to kill me." Issei and Aquila turned towards Steno, whose tone showed she understood just how close to death she was. The panic and fear morphed into anger, with her giving Issei a look of absolute hatred. "How dare a weak piece of excrement such as yourself threaten my life? Threaten my chance at getting revenge on the Olympians? Slave, take him down." Aquila didn't respond with words, instead simply vanishing and reappearing in a shower of sparks behind Issei. The brunette managed to detect her from the noise, throwing himself forwards into a roll and barely escaping the chop to the neck that would have rendered him unconscious, his arm swinging towards where he expected Aquila to be. Compression shot. The eagle-turned woman tilted her head to the side to avoid the blast of draconic power before dashing towards Issei. Fast. She raised her leg and slammed it down within a hard stomp which Issei barely managed to dodge, and that caused the cobblestone underneath them explode hard enough for the shockwave to project Issei away, something that he made use of by rolling to bleed off momentum before tossing himself to his feet, this time facing Aquila, quite a fair distance away. Compression shot. Compression shot. Compression shot. The eagle woman dodged the 3 consecutive shots at a languid walking pace, causing a bead of sweat to roll down Issei's neck and forehead. She's too fast for me to hit, and too strong for me to consider using anything other than ranged attacks. These consecutive compression shots are starting to tire me out, so I need to figure something out fast. Aquila stomped hard on the ground, alerting Issei of the fact that she pretty much rocketed herself towards him, one moment being far away, the next being right in front of him, her right arm cocked backwards for a punch to the face. Issei's mind was going a mile a minute as he tried to figure out how to react. She can't dodge a compression shot at this range, but it's unlikely that I'll be able to hit a vital spot before she caves my skull in. Do I even want to hit a vital? I know she's trying to kill me, but she's been enslaved by Steno. She's not an enemy, only an opponent. I know, instead of compressing the power into a single point for a piercing blow. Issei's index finger, the one he used as a focus for his compression shot, curled in with the rest of his fingers forming a fist, before a green glow emerged from the entirety of his gauntleted fist. Raw. A massive amount of round, pebble-sized blast of green energy exploded from Issei's fist, bombarding the entirety of Aquila's front with spread-out concussive force, knocking her a good distance away and ragdolling her for a good while before she managed to reorient herself, her feet skidding as she touched the ground from the momentum that she hadn't bled off. Dabbing at the corner of her mouth with a closed fist, Aquila was met with a fist covered in some red flecks. She looked towards the boy that was fighting her, watching as a smirk blossomed on his face as he finally figured out a way to actually hit her. Issei, on the other hand, was not as confident as he seemed. While outwardly his smirk said, "Great success," inwardly things were a whole different story. Holy fucking crapsack in a hooker's douche nozzle, that was fucking tiring. It's worse than the compression shot in terms of energy efficiency. I don't know how many more of these I can use. Deciding not to give her opponent any more time to make plans, Aquila dashed towards him again, her hand wreathed in electricity in order to shock him unconscious. She hits me with that and I'm done. Shotgun burst. The pebble-sized blasts heading towards Aquila forced her to halt in place and erect a shield, a yellow, octagonal-shaped barrier blocking the blasts that would have hit her, while the rest splashed uselessly on the ground around and behind her. He hit me with more than he hit my shield. So being closer allows him to hit more accurately, which increases the total damage of the attack, while being further makes that attack a waste of power. So, if I zhu. Compression shot. She was surprised when a beam as thick as a human thigh impacted onto her shield and started forcing her back. Planted her feet firmly on the ground to avoid skidding, her resistance was rewarded by a cracking of her barrier. Her shield shattered before she could reinforce it, causing her to be hit by the attack, albeit at an extremely reduced strength, tossing her further away and ragdolling her. While Aquila kept reassessing Issei's threat level, the host of the Red Heavenly Dragon wasn't having a good time. Crap. My body is straining from channeling all that energy, my energy is dropping faster than it should. Probably something to do with awakening Midgard summer, and my shotgun burst made my arm numb from recoil, and Aquila isn't even bothered enough to take me seriously. She's tanking my attacks for the sake of tanking them. How the hell am I supposed to make it out of here alive? The sound of whistling from behind him prompted Issei to toss himself to the ground, causing a wooden club to barely miss his head. Oh wow. Why am I feeling déjà vu from crap? He had to roll out of the way of a follow-up swing which would have obliterated his chest cage, before rolling back into a standing position that allowed him to keep Alex, the club-toting maid, within his field of view. Said maid giggled airily at that, her bared breasts doing their absolute best to attract Issei's gaze, before she spoke up. Silly Issei, you should listen to Big Sister, since Big Sister is the smarterest. Holy shit, you're Uriali. Holy shit, your sister had you serving her while topless. That is equal parts hot and messed up. Well, as long as shit. He had to dodge another swing of the club, before being backhanded by the maid. Hard. Flying backwards, Issei found himself being blasted in the back by a small bolt of electricity, tossing him towards the ground and forcing him to grit his teeth as the current ran through his body. Had he not been enhancing himself with the boosted gear's power, Issei didn't doubt that either one of those attacks, on their own, would have definitely knocked him unconscious. Maybe even kill him. Yes. It stirs. Issei looked at Stino, seeing her raise a wooden staff with a gren gem at the top, before she slammed it thrice on the floor. Blam blam blam. Distracted, the brunette could do nothing as he was lifted by Alex Uriali, who held him from behind in a tight hug, with strength beyond anything he could possibly overcome. Listen to my voice and heed my call, he who takes and takes, the legendary invader serpent, Midgardsamur. A split erupted from the ground, causing the earth around them to shake as it widened more and more. Soon enough, a single eye about as big as Issei was tall looked up from the crevice, their cloudy state being the only indicator that Midgardsamur had not been fully awakened. Rise, Midgardsamur. Rise and take my sacrifice. A child of man and son of God, gifted with the divine power that is the sacred gear. The ground fractured further, a massive serpentine head emerging from the breach, waving and bobbing in a somewhat drunken manner, the poison-green pupils slightly milky, the normally slit pupil dilated widely. Stino pointed her staff towards Midgardsamur, a green beam of energy flowing from it to the serpent's forehead, causing it to twitch and writhe, its maw opening slowly, the strain visible on Stino as it did, as if the serpent knew, even subconsciously, that as soon as Stino got what she wanted, which was the power boost from the sacrifice, it'd get killed. Bring forth the sacrifice urhg. Stino's words were interrupted by a bloody hand emerging from her gut. Looking back at the source of the hand, she found a deadly serious quilla. She coughed once, flecks of blood flying out and wetting the ground while 2 trails went down the corners of her mouth. Wheezing in pain, she spoke weakly. How? You were my slave. I was never your slave. I was bound to the snake, not to you, and I was unable to leave the castle for as long as it remained alive. However, the only way to get to the serpent was to get you to summon it, and the only way to truly kill it is when it's fully awake. Any less and it goes into a regenerative sleep. So, why you planned this whole thing? Not at all. I can't really control who comes to the castle, can I? No, all I did was try to help whomever did come find the answers as to what was happening here. I hoped that if someone kicked up enough of a fuss and made things harder than you expected, you'd be forced to summon the snake earlier than expected. Without the preparation time or the required power, I expected you to be unable to suppress its consciousness, but it to be far from its full power. I'd strike it down, then leave. I never expected to get the host of one of the 13 Longinus as the other part of the equation, and as the first one to actually force you to change the sacrifice ritual. Now, I'll finally find my freedom. Having said that, Aquila pulled her arm back from Stino's stomach, before taking away her staff and smashing the focusing stone on the ground, allowing a pulse of magic to pervade the entire grounds. Sister. Worried about her sister, Uriali dashed towards where Stino and Aquila were, only to find herself being bitten into by a gigantic snake, her spine snapping in half and killing her instantly. Shaking the corpse to ensure that it was fully and truly dead, the still half-cognizant Midgardsamur tossed it upwards before aiming his own open maw up, allowing the corpse to smoothly slide down its gullet. While Stino watched the death of her last remaining sister in shock and sorrow, and Aquila started surging her power in preparation to attack the snake, Issei was startled by the sudden, yet familiar voice that graced his ears. Moi. I just had the best damn sleep in my entire life. Diedrich? Is that really you? Will I regret it if I say yes? Oh, it is you. You have no idea how glad I am you're awake. A lot of stuff happened so far. One minute I'm peeing in the Twilight Woods, the next moment I'm facing Midgardsamur at a magical castle. Did you just say you faced Midgardsamur? Technically, I'm still facing it right now. Having said that, Issei pointed the boosted gear towards the still awakening Midgardsamur. How did you manage to get yourself into something of this scale so soon? There is literally no way for you to survive a battle against Midgardsamur. Your body can't take the amount of power needed to even match it. If you had a few years to train, then maybe. But as you are right now, you're screwed. It's a good thing I'm not fighting it then, isn't it? What do you mea, crackum? The fuck was that? Aquila Victus. The Roman eagle of victory. No really, what the fuck is going on here? 5 minutes of explanations later, and then she stabbed her in the gut with her hand, and then her was killed by the beast she herself summoned. Damn. I almost feel bad for this Steno person. I know, right? If only she weren't a crazy evil girl who makes human sacrifices. And she even had some amazing breasts. Do you think of anything other than breasts? Yes? You're a very bad liar. We need to change that. Oh look, the fight seems about to begin. Ooh, finally, I'm free. I can finish what I wait, I know that power. The snake of invasion looked towards the source of the power, seeing a vaguely familiar woman bleeding out on the ground, next to Aquila Victus. My fatal enemy. Enough talk, Midgardsummer, raw. Lightning exploded from Aquila and started coalescing midair in the form of a giant eagle, before even her body turned into electricity and flowed into the construct, its massive wings releasing limb-thick bolts of lightning in all directions, scorching the earth around it. I will finish what I have started back in Rome, you will lose, thunderscreech. A horrible sound akin to nails on a chalkboard, except magnified a few hundred times, caused Midgardsummer to hiss in displeasure while shaking its head, before a blackish-green aura of power sprang around him, causing the ground around him to start gradually eroding. Intent on not dying, Issei pumped power into his body and ran away from the immediate area of the battle, maintaining a safe distance from the action while he allowed his body to recover its stamina. Chronic toxicity. A green cloud of gas emerged from its mouth, speeding up the corrosion of the earth, stone and trees around it, before it took the shape of a set of arrows. Guided ordnance. The toxic green-colored arrows sped towards the Thunderbird, who retaliated with a flap of its wings that released a storm of crackling bolts of lightning, causing the two to explode midair, the shockwave almost knocking Issei onto his behind despite how far he was from the fight. Holy shit, that's freaking crazy. I felt that from here. Faye, that's nothing. A light scuffle between me and Albion would have completely erased this whole terrain 4 times over. This is not at all impressive. That sounds fucking terrifying. Now I feel less bad about the fact that you and your rival are trapped within sacred gears. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? It means that I am 100% sure that if I die, it won't be at the hands of an extremely overpowered, raging dragon. Oh, Issei. Sweet, naive, summer child Issei. You have no idea what you're talking about. Is there an actual possibility that I get obliterated by an overpowered, raging dragon? Well, you see, thing is. Oh look, they're preparing their final attacks. Issei's head snapped over towards the fight, watching as the crackling Thunderbird charged a massive ball of electricity at about chest height, while the serpent charged a sickly-looking ball of black-green power in its mouth. As if prompted by an unseen signal, the two shot their attacks at the same time, which slammed into each other midair before stalling as each tried to overwhelm and push past the other. The shockwaves from the clash of powers forced Issei to throw himself to the ground lest he fly away, while the castle started crashing around them. Midgardsummer's attack seemed to be pushing forward, slowly overwhelming Aquila's, before the Eagle of Victory looked up to the sky and screeched, thunderclouds suddenly and rapidly blotting out the sky. The rumble of thunder sounded out loud, the light traveling between clouds, before a massive bolt of lightning fell directly on Aquila. Empowered to her utmost limit, with passive trails of lightning jumping from the corners of her eyes and beak, the bird reared back before diving towards the two attacks, slamming into the back of her own. The snake's attack only lasted for half a second. The two attacks dispersed under the sheer power that Aquila was packing as she dove directly for Midgardsummer, and before he could do a thing, she struck. Diving swoop. Boom. Ooh. Digging himself out from under the trees he was buried under during the explosion, Issei looked towards the scene of the aftermath of the battle. Aquila stood to one side, still in her Thunderbird form, chest heaving heavily and one of her wings twisted at the wrong angle, while a scorched Midgardsummer was stretched throughout the ground like a knee sock full of sand. It's finally over. My mortal enemy has been defeated for good. The bird hopped towards the snake's corpse, prodding at it with the tip of its beak, before moving away, satisfied, and slumping onto one of the few castle walls that remained standing, visibly doing its best to reduce the stress on its body post-fight. Holy shit, Diedrich. That was awesome. And to think that one day I'll be fighting at that level. Yes, yes, your opponents will be a bunch of powerful monsters with evil intentions towards you and your family, absolutely joyful. When you put it like that, I kind of wish that I never have to fight at that level. A twitch from the gigantic snake's head had Issei looking that way, only to witness Midgardsamar's jaw wide open around Steno. Chomp. Before it swallowed. A few minutes earlier. Steno did not know how she was still alive. After getting impaled by the taser chicken, being at pretty much the splash zone in the fight between the protecting eagle and the invading snake, and getting ragdolled by the explosion of the final blow, she still managed to heal herself with the waning power in her. Now she just needed to keep playing dead, and after that Issei brat and the bird bint left, she could plan her revenge on the two of them. But before that, what the hell is this I'm smelling? Taking a chance, Steno cracked one of her eyes open by the slightest bit. Just enough to see the back of Midgardsamar's throat. She didn't even manage to scream before dying. Now, Issei and Aquila could only watch in terror and horrified wonder, respectively, as Midgardsamar's body started writhing around the ground, sending the scattered bits of debris left over from the previous battle flying across the clearing. Issei just barely managed to dodge a massive tree, while Aquila luckily saw no debris going into a direct collision course with her. Green smog emerged from all over the snake's body, from its mouth, eyes, and even from between its body's scales, before it suddenly started going the reverse way and getting sucked back into the body instead of wafting outwards. The smog created a shell of energy around the body, before small cracks started appearing all over the surface of the shell. Small pulses of power emerged from the shell, and they were enough to terrify Issei into silence. The power was reaching a level that it did not during the previous fight, even when Aquila used her last move, and it took everything Issei had just to breathe. Holy fucking shit, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm absolutely going to die. I don't wanna die. I don't wanna die. I don't wanna die. Hey kid, I don't wanna die. Don't wanna die. Don't wanna die. Oi, brat. I still have so much I want to do. I still want to live. I don't wanna die. I don't. Issei. Diedrag's shout managed to knock Issei out of his negative state, a lingering haze in his mind slowly clearing out as he spoke. Diedrag. What happened? Suddenly the world got really dark, and it was really hard to breathe, and it felt like I was going to. You were subjected to the force of Midgardsamar's presence. Presence? Presence, fighting spirit, battle aura, killing intent. You humans have a lot of names for it. It was pretty much Midgardsamar's power showing its willingness, and ability, to kill you. When someone of a certain level of strength really focuses on you, you notice it. That's mostly because you have enough sensitivity to magic that you are capable of feeling the underlying intention behind it. It's why some types of magic are capable of making someone ignorant of it cringe away or avoid it. The general feel behind them. Midgardsamar transformed. I don't know how exactly, but I know that it involved eating that Steno witch's body. After the amount of damage it incurred during the fight with the bird over there, the power exploded with an indiscriminate desire to cause pain and violence being projected everywhere around it at once. For fuck's sake, Diedrag, that doesn't make me feel better at all. That asshole can pretty much freeze me in place with his intentions alone. He doesn't even have to act to stop me, just feel the intent to do so. Jesus Christ, what kind of monster world is this? This is the world of those who are righteous and true, and those with something to protect. This is the world of those who fight so that the ones they cherish do not have to. Issei looked to the side, seeing Aquila back in her human form, her right arm visibly broken, a limp on her left leg and bloody patches all over her body. Ignoring Issei's assessment of her form, Aquila spoke up. I chose to fight for Rome, not for honor or glory, but to protect. I became the Eagle of Victory, because victory was the only way to ensure the safety of my people. The first time I did not attain victory was in this battle against Midgardsamar, and Rome has fallen since in my absence. I do not intend to taste defeat today, Hyodo Issei, as I still have something to protect. While the Roman Empire may be no longer, the spirit of Rome still persists, living on within my heart, and it burns strong with the desire to destroy that abomination. Issei could only watch, stunned, as the person who looked like she went through a meat grinder said that she still wanted to fight, and to win, against a monster like that, but she wasn't over yet. I intend to destroy Midgardsamar. However, I cannot do it alone, Hyodo Issei. She's right. Things might look bad, but that's no reason to give up. I still have much to live for. Dreams to concretize. For my friends, Motohama and Matsuda. For my parents, Mom and Dad. For my newest companion, Lilith. And for my future harem. Issei's left arm rose, the green jewel on the back of his boosted gear lighting up as a reflection of the rise of his determination. I will survive. And I will win. A green cloud of energy started flowing around Issei. The amount of pressure behind it impressive for how little it was in the face of such odds. Aquila could do nothing other than respect the boy for the determination. Shaking herself out of her reverie, she spoke up. I see you have come around to my point of view. Tell me what I have to do. She looked at Issei, her gaze meeting his and looking for something, and she could not withhold her small grin as she seemingly found it. Placing her hand on Issei's shoulder, she spoke up. Midgard Summer has never been this powerful before, and if what I believe is right, he's having to fight Steno for control over his body. It's probably the only reason why we're still alive, and our only opportunity. If either of them emerges victorious, we die. I don't have enough power to kill Midgard Summer as he is, and neither do you. Individually, that is. What are you getting at? I'll summon as much power as I can and give it to Hyodo. He uses the properties of his boosted gear to multiply it as much as he can, and then uses it to take down the snake. Are you crazy? Issei's body won't be able to withstand all of that power. Before the increase, he's more likely to survive by escape. Do it. Kid, are you crazy? I'm not crazy, Diedrich. I am only conscious that this is the only available option. Midgard Summer, Steno, whoever it is in the end, it's the type of being that causes pain, loss and destruction to innocence. If it's Steno, she's likely to hunt me down and kill everyone I love. If it's Midgard Summer, then I'll never be sure if it won't just drop in on my hometown one day and start munching on its people, or maybe my friends or family travel somewhere and inadvertently run into it. Hell, it could end up happening to the families of other people. Good people. If I can stop it right now, then I'll do it. Not because it's my obligation, or anything of the sort. But because I want to, and that's the type of man that I am. Are you certain of this, Hyodo? As the Red Dragon said, you're more likely to survive by running away right now. If I run away from this, then even if my body is still alive, the Hyodo Issei that I wish to be, as well as all of my future dreams, they will die instead. None of the two powerful beings could really say anything negative after what they heard. The boy. Nay, it was wrong to call him a boy, for Hyodo Issei was nothing less than a man, had made his choice. Not feeling the need to make any further confirmations, Aquila limped towards Issei and placed a hand on top of his boosted gear before looking up to the sky and screeching once more. A massive thunderbolt crashed on her, but instead of using that power to recover, she shunted all of it, and even a bit more, into the boosted gear. Ooh, it burned. Fire and lightning warred against each other as they attempted to occupy the same space at the same time, and Issei's arm was the one suffering the consequences of that. The veins along his upper arm throbbed, visibly and painfully, while the boosted gear heated up to an orange color, with sparks of lightning being spat out randomly along its length. The green gem of the boosted gear seemed to be crackling with some inner lightning, and it was enough to kill most adult men. Hyodo Issei isn't most men. He bolstered his will with images of whom and what he fought for, both to protect, to achieve and to become, and using his will and determination as two grindstones on opposite sides, Issei placed the power in between them. Grind more. Thinner point, for better piercing power. The power started taking shape within Issei's psyche, two contrasting flows of yellow lightning and green flames being forcibly ground to a shape different to the shapeless chaos they wished to be. They tried to simultaneously rebel against Issei's control, and against each other, but the young man would not be deterred. Twirl, spin, braid. The two powers, while being sharpened to the extreme, were also being swirled together in a braid of power. Two different materials, that together increased the maximum power of the structure. However, no, not enough. Grind more. Twirl, spin, braid, mix. The lighting and fire were forcibly melded into one another. No matter how much they desired not to mix, how much they fought and resisted, Hyodo Issei would not be denied. Mixing percentage. 30/70ths, 40/60ths, 0.50% 50. Normally, such a construct of two different powers, both of a destructive, chaotic nature that desired, more than anything else, to spread to everything nearby and propagate would be unable to be properly mixed. However, Issei had something that many others did not. A proper bonding agent in the form of wild, untapped tantric energy. After all, the energy generated from the sexual connection of two different individuals, real of imagined, surely could connect two different powers. This is. Hey, Midgard pussy. Yeah, I'm talking to you, you overgrown garden snake. Eat any more siblings lately? At that moment, it didn't really matter whether Stino or Midgardsormr was holding the reins. Both were insulted and they simultaneously turned their attention towards the one who did it, maw gaping wide with the intent to completely obliterate the disrespectful whelp. However, boost, 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 boost. For all the glorious opie in the world. Say hi to your friends in hell, thunder dragons roar. Ooh, bright. That is how anyone present would have described the scene. Whereas the powers previously thrown around generally dissolved, or broke, or exploded, or burned. The energy released from the boosted gear by Issei in the form of an orange spear, the surface covered by simultaneous small flames and crackling electricity, and a small, but extremely dense, purple core of condensed tantric energy did not do any of those. Instead, everything it touched simply disintegrated. Stenorsormr's body simply vanished. No trace of it, not even a single scale, remained behind. It was in the path of the beam, so it was erased. As was the ground, and the trees, and the rock, and the mountains, and everything else within a 3-mile-wide cone, going as far as the eye could see distance-wise. Aquila eyed the level of devastation wrought about by the sheer stubborn will of a young man with shock and incredulity. That attack. Midgardsormr was extremely powerful, so the power would have used his maximum power output in half again, maybe even 2/3. After using up all that energy, the attack still had the power to cause that much destruction? She looked at Issei, his gauntleted arms still raised and actually releasing steam, his shoulders moving up and down as he took deep breaths. He should, for all intents and purposes, be dead. His body should not have been able to cope with releasing an attack of that caliber. Issei was. Well, to be quite blunt, in the large scale of things, Issei was a weakling. Yet, a weakling as himself managed to hold her back for quite a bit when they battled, managed to rally himself up after feeling the full brunt of malicious pressure, and managed to do something that should be impossible to all but the most capable of magicians, and mixed two different powers just because he could. If this was what Issei could do as a weakling, then seeing him actually getting strong, achieving something like balance breaker, that was a terrifying thought. The young man she happened to be thinking about took in a deep breath, before falling backwards, and then his chest stilled. Ignoring how tired and battered she herself was, Aquila shambled towards Issei, before planting her ear on his chest. His heart still beating, but it's weak, very weak. It could stop at any moment, and he could die. She blinked to herself as an idea came to mind. And I did that, despite the situation, left her giddy with excitement. Her sense of curiosity over just how much this would change things melded with her desire to help a young man who willingly helped her erase a mistake of hers permanently, and she decided to act. She tore Issei's shirt open, noticing that the left sleeve was extremely burnt, despite the fact that the skin itself had patches of pink, raw skin along its length. Opening her mouth wide, a spark of electricity jumped between her canine teeth, before she sunk them into the bicep of his left arm. When she pulled back, leaving behind a trail of crackling electricity, she watched as the electricity rearranged itself, copying her appearance at full power in the shape of a tattoo. What the hell? I give him a bit of power, and said power rearranges itself into an aesthetically pleasing shape. What? Deciding that she could try puzzling out the existence that was Hyodo Issei later on, when there was less risk of her going insane, Aquila acquired her Thunderbird form, albeit not as big as at full power, more alongside the size of a bald eagle, before hopping on top of Issei's chest and prodding at him by connecting to the small shard of power she had donated to him. She sensed. Well, it was some sort of thread, or string, and it was colored purple. Feeling for the location of the other side of the thread, Aquila vanished with the unconscious Issei in a shower of sparks, reappearing in front of a very surprised succubus. Before the succubus could do or say a thing, the Thunderbird screeched, before vanishing with a flash of light and the lingering scent of ozone, leaving Issei behind. A shirtless, sweaty Issei with a myriad of injuries and a tattoo that Lilith knew he didn't previously have. Sighing in exasperation and pinching the bridge of her nose, Lilith had to externalize her thoughts at the moment. Really, Issei? You take a pee break, vanish, and reappear 15 minutes later looking like you went through a war? Really? Biting her lip, she spoke in a slightly milder tone. At least your new tattoo looks good. Give you an earring and you'll get the whole bad boy look down pat. She shivered at the image that thought elicited, her instincts begging her to act while Issei was unconscious. What she did instead was lift him up, hoist him over her shoulders in a fireman carry, and make her way towards where she knew Luxuria was. Chapter. End. Ha. Bet you didn't expect this, did you? You expected them to make it straight to the land of the sex and honeys. Well, that's too bad, because curveballs make for interesting content. In all seriously though, I'd like to know your thoughts on this chapter. Was it good? Was it bad? What did you think of the characters introduced in here? Leave all those answers to me in the review section please. Franco Gamer XZ, out. First, previous ch4 of 47 next.